Single dad stopped a kidnapping outside a luxury hotel. He never knew she was a CEO. Tonight, I'm sharing a story about Ethan Cole, a night security guard who became an accidental hero when he witnessed something terrifying outside the Grand Meridian Hotel. What he didn't know was that saving one woman's life would change everything he thought he knew about courage, sacrifice, and second chances. Stay with me until the end and comment below with your city so I can see how far this story travels around the world. The rain came down in sheets that October night, the kind of rain that turned the streets of downtown into rivers of reflected neon and made every shadow seem darker, every sound more ominous. Ethan Cole stood beneath the narrow awning of the parking structure adjacent to the Grand Meridian Hotel, watching the storm roll in from the east. His security uniform was slightly too big for his lean frame, the jacket worn at the elbows, the name tag scratched and faded. He'd been on shift for 6 hours already, and his feet ached in boots that needed replacing 3 months ago. But Ethan didn't complain. He never complained. At 34 years old, he'd learned that complaining changed nothing. Action did. Hard work did. Showing up every single day for his son did. He pulled his phone from his pocket, careful to shield it from the rain, and checked the time. 9:47. In his messages, there was a photo from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor, who watched Liam during his night shifts. His 7-year-old son was curled up on her couch, fast asleep with his favorite book still clutched in his small hands, Where the Wild Things Are. Ethan's chest tightened with that familiar mixture of love and guilt. Love because that little boy was his entire world. Guilt because he wished he could be there to tuck him in every single night instead of working until 2 in the morning just to keep their heads above water. Soon, he told himself, just keep pushing. Keep grinding. Better days are coming. He'd been telling himself that for 3 years now, ever since Sarah left. Ever since she had decided that motherhood and marriage weren't what she wanted after all. That she needed to find herself somewhere far away from the responsibilities she'd created. The divorce papers came by mail. The child support checks never did. So Ethan worked. He worked the construction site from 6 in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, then rushed home to have 2 precious hours with Liam, helping with homework, making dinner, listening to stories about school and friends, and then justice of having to eat vegetables. Then Mrs. Chen would arrive, Ethan would put on his security uniform, and he'd head to his second job, patrolling the parking structures and loading docks of the business district until the early morning hours. It was brutal. It was exhausting. But every time he looked at Liam's smile, every time his son wrapped those skinny arms around his neck and said, "Love you, Dad," Ethan knew it was worth it. Every single sleepless hour was worth it. The rain intensified, drumming against the concrete above him. Ethan stepped closer to the edge of the awning, peering out at the street. The Grand Meridian rose like a glass and steel monument to wealth across the avenue, its lobby glowing with golden light, its entrance sheltered by a pristine white canopy where valets in burgundy uniforms hustled to open car doors for guests who stepped out in designer clothes and diamonds that probably cost more than Ethan made in a year. It was a different world over there, a world he'd only ever glimpsed from the outside. His radio crackled. "Cole, you copy?" Ethan pressed the button on his shoulder mic. "Copy, dispatch. Got a report of suspicious activity in Lot C, Level 3. Can you check it out?" "On my way." He turned away from the glittering hotel and headed into the parking structure, his flashlight beam cutting through the fluorescent-lit gloom. His footsteps echoed off the concrete. Cars sat in neat rows, silent and still. He walked the perimeter of Level 3, checking between vehicles, looking for anything out of place. Teenagers sometimes came here to drink or smoke or make out in their parents' cars. Usually they scattered when they saw his flashlight, but tonight the level was empty. "Dispatch, Lot C clear, probably just a false alarm." "Copy that. Stay alert." Ethan made his way back down to street level, returning to his post near the exit. The rain hadn't let up. If anything, it was worse now, coming down so hard that visibility across the street was reduced to blurred shapes and colors. The traffic lights at the intersection cycled from red to green to yellow, their glow bleeding into the wet asphalt. He checked his phone again. 9:58. 4 more hours. That's when he saw the black SUV. It came from the south, moving fast. Too fast for the weather conditions. Its headlights cut through the rain like twin blades as it barreled toward the intersection. For a moment, Ethan thought it would run the red light. But at the last second, it jerked to a stop directly in front of the Grand Meridian's entrance, tires screeching against the wet pavement. Ethan straightened, his instincts suddenly alert. Something about the way the vehicle had arrived felt wrong, urgent, aggressive. The SUV sat there, engine running, windshield wipers slashing back and forth. In the golden light spilling from the hotel entrance, Ethan could see the vehicle more clearly. It was a black Escalade, windows heavily tinted, no front license plate. The kind of vehicle that screamed either wealth or trouble, or both. The hotel's glass doors opened and a woman emerged. Even from across the street, even through the rain, Ethan could see she was striking. She wore a crimson coat that fell to her knees, its color vivid against the gray night. Her dark hair was pulled back and she walked with the kind of confidence that came from never doubting your place in the world. A valet hurried alongside her with an umbrella, trying to keep her dry as they approached the curb where a silver Mercedes waited. She was clearly important, clearly wealthy, clearly someone who belonged in that glittering world behind the glass. But then everything went wrong. The rear doors of the Escalade flew open. Two figures burst out, moving with terrifying speed and purpose. They wore black tactical clothing and ski masks that covered everything except their eyes. Before the valet could even react, before the woman could scream, they were on her. The first man grabbed her arm, yanking her away from the valet with brutal force. The umbrella went flying, spinning away into the rain. The woman cried out, a sharp sound of shock and fear that cut through the night like broken glass. The second man grabbed her other arm, and together they began dragging her toward the open door of the SUV. Ethan's mind went blank for a split second, unable to process what he was seeing. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen in real life, not right in front of a luxury hotel, not with witnesses and cameras, and the woman screamed again, and suddenly Ethan's paralysis shattered. He was running before he consciously decided to move. His boots pounded against the wet pavement as he sprinted across the avenue, rain hammering his face, his heart exploding in his chest. Somewhere in the rational part of his brain, a voice was shouting that this was insane, that he was unarmed, that these men could be dangerous, that he should call the police and let them handle it. But that voice was drowned out by something louder, something more primal. She needs help, now. The valet had stumbled backward, dropping his umbrella, too shocked to do anything but stare. Inside the hotel, people were just beginning to notice the commotion, faces appearing at the glass doors. But no one was moving. No one was helping. Ethan was halfway across the street when one of the kidnappers looked up and saw him coming. The man's eyes widened behind his mask. Surprise, then calculation. He barked something to his partner, words swallowed by the rain and wind. The woman was fighting them now, thrashing and kicking, trying to wrench herself free. Her crimson coat twisted around her body. Rain plastered her hair to her face. Ethan could see the terror in her eyes, wide and white and desperate. "Let her go!" Ethan's voice tore from his throat, raw and commanding. The first kidnapper, the one who'd spotted him, released the woman's arm and reached into his jacket. Ethan saw the dark shape of a weapon emerging and didn't think, didn't slow, just changed his angle at the last possible moment. He slammed into the man with his full body weight, a textbook tackle that would have made his high school football coach proud. They went down hard on the wet pavement, the weapon skittering away across the sidewalk. Pain exploded through Ethan's shoulder where he'd made contact, but he ignored it, driving his weight down, trying to keep the man pinned. "Help!" he shouted toward the hotel. "Call the police! Call!" The second kidnapper still had hold of the woman, but now he was torn. Continue with the abduction or help his partner. The SUV's engine revved, and Ethan heard someone yelling from inside the vehicle, urging them to hurry. The woman made the decision for them. With a sudden burst of strength born from pure adrenaline and terror, she twisted in the second man's grip, bringing her elbow up and back with vicious force. It caught him in the throat. He gagged and loosened his hold just enough for her to tear free, stumbling backward into the rain. But freedom was fleeting. The man Ethan had tackled was stronger than he looked, and trained. He bucked upward, throwing Ethan off balance, then delivered a brutal punch to Ethan's ribs that drove the air from his lungs. Before Ethan could recover, the kidnapper was on his feet, and Ethan saw the flash of metal in his hand. Not a gun, A knife. "Should have minded your own business," the man snarled, his voice muffled by the mask. He lunged forward, the blade cutting through the rain-filled air. Ethan threw up his arm instinctively, defensive, and felt a line of white-hot fire open across his forearm as the knife sliced through his jacket and the skin beneath. Blood bloomed instantly, mixing with the rain running down his arm. But Ethan had grown up in rough neighborhoods. He'd been in fights before, back when he was younger and angrier at the world. He knew that the moment you showed weakness, the moment you backed down, you lost. So instead of retreating, he stepped forward into the attack. His right hand shot out, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting hard, redirecting the blade away from his body. At the same time, his left fist came up in a tight, brutal arc, catching the kidnapper square in the solar plexus. The man's breath exploded out in a whoosh of air, and his grip on the knife faltered. Ethan didn't give him time to recover. He twisted the wrist harder, forcing the knife to fall, then shoved the man backward into the side of the Escalade with enough force to dent the door panel. The kidnapper's head bounced off the metal with a hollow thunk, and his knees buckled. But there were still two of them, and now the second man was advancing on Ethan, fury radiating from every line of his body. The woman in the crimson coat had stumbled against the hotel's wall, breathing hard, her face pale with shock. "Run!" Ethan shouted at her. "Get inside! Go!" She didn't move, frozen in terror or shock or both. The second kidnapper rushed Ethan, faster than he expected. They collided like two freight trains, grappling, struggling for dominance. The man was trying to force Ethan back toward the street, toward the open door of the SUV. Ethan could smell cologne and cigarettes, and underneath it all, the copper tang of his own blood still flowing from the wound on his arm. They spun in a violent dance, rain pouring over both of them, feet slipping on the wet sidewalk. Ethan's back hit a parking meter, pain shooting up his spine. But he used the leverage to drive his knee up into the man's midsection. Once, twice, 3 times. The kidnapper's grip loosened. Ethan broke free, gasping, and delivered a wild haymaker that caught the man on the side of the jaw. The kidnapper staggered sideways, stunned. That's when Ethan heard the sirens. Distant, but growing closer. Someone had finally called the police. The SUV's horn blared. 3 sharp blasts. An order. An abort signal. The first kidnapper, the one with the knife, was already scrambling toward the open door, clutching his ribs, blood streaming from his nose. The second man hesitated for just a moment, looking between Ethan and the woman, calculating whether he could still complete the job. "Run!" Ethan shouted again, this time at the kidnappers, his voice hoarse and fierce. "Get out of here before I tear you apart." It wasn't smart. It wasn't tactical. But something in Ethan's eyes, some wild, reckless fury that came from 3 years of fighting just to survive, fighting to give his son a decent life, fighting against every obstacle the world threw at him, made the kidnapper think twice. The man turned and bolted for the SUV. Ethan started after him, but his legs suddenly felt like rubber and his vision swam. The adrenaline was wearing off, and he was becoming aware of how much his arm hurt, how hard he was breathing, how close he'd come to getting seriously hurt. Or worse. The Escalade's tires screamed against the wet pavement as the driver floored it, the vehicle fishtailing slightly before shooting forward into the intersection. It blew through the red light, nearly clipping a taxi, and disappeared into the rain-soaked night, its taillights fading like dying embers. And then there was silence. Just the rain, the wind, the approaching sirens. Ethan stood in the middle of the sidewalk, water streaming down his face, his arm throbbing with hot pulses of pain, his entire body shaking with spent adrenaline. His torn jacket hung open, blood soaking through the sleeve. His boots were scuffed and dirty. He looked like he'd been through a war. Slowly, he turned toward the woman. She was still pressed against the hotel's wall, her crimson coat soaked through, her dark hair hanging in wet tangles around her face. Rain and blood, he wasn't sure whose, streaked across her cheek. Her chest heaved with rapid, panicked breaths, and her hands were shaking violently. But her eyes, dark, intelligent, fierce, were locked on him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then her legs gave out. Ethan lunged forward, catching her before she hit the pavement. She collapsed into his arms, trembling uncontrollably, and he held her, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other supporting her weight as best he could despite his own injuries. "You're okay," he murmured, his voice rough but gentle. "You're safe now. I've got you." She didn't speak, just gripped his jacket with shaking fingers, her face pressed against his chest. He could feel her heart racing, could feel the tremors running through her body. The hotel doors burst open, and suddenly there were people everywhere, valets, security guards, hotel staff, all rushing forward with questions and exclamations and shock written across their faces. Someone threw a blanket over the woman's shoulders. Someone else was asking Ethan if he was all right, pointing at his bleeding arm. The sirens were loud now, right on top of them. Red and blue lights painted the wet street, reflecting off the glass and steel of the Grand Meridian. 2 police cruisers screeched to a stop, followed by an ambulance. Ethan felt the woman being gently pulled from his arms by paramedics. She looked back at him, her eyes wide and dark, and filled with something he couldn't quite name. Shock, certainly. Fear, definitely. But underneath it all, something else. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. "Sir, you're injured," a paramedic was saying, guiding him toward the ambulance. "We need to look at that arm." Ethan let himself be led, his legs moving automatically, his mind still trying to catch up with what had just happened, what he'd just done. Behind him, more police cars were arriving. Officers were spreading out, securing the scene, taking statements. The hotel entrance had become a chaos of flashing lights and urgent voices and the crackle of police radios. Ethan sat on the back edge of the ambulance while a paramedic cut away his sleeve and began cleaning the knife wound. It was deep but not life-threatening. It would need stitches. It would leave a scar. "You're lucky," the paramedic said. "An inch to the left and this would have hit the artery." Lucky. Right. Ethan watched as other paramedics attended to the woman in the crimson coat. She was sitting on a gurney now, wrapped in blankets, talking to a police officer. Even from this distance, even soaking wet and clearly traumatized, there was something about her presence that commanded attention. The way she held herself. The way people gravitated toward her, deferential and concerned. "That woman you saved," the paramedic said, following Ethan's gaze. "Do you know who she is?" Ethan shook his head. "No idea, just saw she needed help." The paramedic whistled low. "You're about to become very famous, my friend. That's Isabella Ford." The name meant nothing to Ethan. He shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at his injured arm. "Should I know who that is?" "She's only one of the wealthiest people in the country, CEO of Ford Global Holdings. That company owns like half the businesses in this city." The paramedic paused in his work to gesture toward the towering buildings surrounding them. "See that high-rise? Ford property. The shopping center down the street? Ford property. Hell, probably half the stuff you buy comes from a company she owns." Ethan looked back at the woman, Isabella Ford apparently, and felt something twist in his chest. Of course she was rich. Of course she was important. Of course she was someone who mattered in the eyes of the world. And he was, what? A night security guard who could barely make rent. A single dad who bought generic cereal and shopped at thrift stores and drove a car that was older than some of his coworkers. 2 different worlds that should never have collided. But they had. For just a few violent, terrifying moments, their worlds had crashed together. And Ethan had done the only thing he knew how to do, protect someone who needed protecting. Because that's what you did. That's what decent people did. "Sir?" A police officer approached, notebook in hand. "I need to get your statement about what happened." Ethan nodded and began recounting the events, keeping his voice steady and factual. He described the SUV, the 2 men, the attempted abduction, the brief fight. He described it the way he might describe a scene from a movie, detached and objective, as if it had happened to someone else. Because if he thought too hard about what he'd actually done, running toward danger instead of away from it, fighting armed men with nothing but his bare hands, putting himself between evil and an innocent person, he might start shaking and never stop. More officers arrived. Someone from the hotel management appeared, wringing his hands and apologizing profusely. Reporters began gathering at the edge of the police perimeter, cameras hoisted on shoulders, sensing a story. Through it all, Ethan kept glancing at Isabella Ford. She was being loaded into an ambulance now, still wrapped in blankets, surrounded by what looked like private security personnel who'd arrived in black SUVs, the good kind this time. She was talking on a phone, her voice too quiet to hear from this distance, but her gestures were animated, urgent. Right before they closed the ambulance doors, she looked across the chaotic scene and found him. Their eyes met. She mouthed something, maybe "thank you," maybe something else. And then the doors closed and the ambulance pulled away, lights flashing but no siren, disappearing into the wet night. And Ethan was left standing there in his torn, bloody uniform, wondering what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. "Mr. Cole?" Another officer approached. "We're going to need you to come down to the station to make a formal statement, and we'll need photographs of your injuries for evidence." "I need to call my neighbor," Ethan said. "My son. I need to let her know I'll be late." "Of course, take your time." Ethan pulled out his phone with trembling hands and dialed Mrs. Chen's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice concerned. "Ethan, is everything okay?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Chen, but I'm going to be really late tonight. There was an incident at work." "Nothing serious," he lied, "but the police need me to answer some questions. Is it okay if Liam stays with you until morning? I'll come get him as soon as I can." Of course, he's fast asleep. Don't worry about him. You be safe." "Thank you. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything, dear. Just take care of yourself." He ended the call and looked down at his bandaged arm. The paramedic had done a good job. The bleeding had stopped, and the wound was clean and dressed. But Ethan could already feel it stiffening, could already imagine how much it would hurt tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. How was he supposed to work construction with an injured arm? How was he supposed to lift and carry and hammer and saw when every movement sent pain shooting through damaged muscles? The reality of his situation was starting to sink in, pushing through the adrenaline fog. He'd played hero, and now he was going to pay the price. Lost wages, medical bills, maybe even lost jobs if he couldn't perform his duties. And for what? For a woman who lived in a world so far removed from his own that they might as well be different species. But even as those bitter thoughts crossed his mind, Ethan pushed them away. Because when he closed his eyes, he could still see the terror in Isabella Ford's face, could still hear her screams, could still feel the moment when those men's hands had grabbed her, trying to drag her into darkness and God knows what fate. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he'd do it all again. Every time, without hesitation. Because that's what his father had taught him, back when Ethan was just a kid and his dad was still alive, still working his 2 jobs to keep their family fed and housed. "Son," he'd said, "you measure a man not by what he has, but by what he does when someone needs help. You always step up, always, even when it costs you, especially when it costs you. That's what makes us human." His father had died when Ethan was 16, a heart attack at age 49, worn out from too much work and too much stress and too little rest. But those words had stayed with Ethan, had shaped him, had made him into the kind of man who would sprint toward danger instead of away from it, even if it left him bleeding, even if it left him broke, even if the world never noticed or cared. "Mr. Cole?" The officer was waiting. "Ready to go?" Ethan nodded, took one last look at the Grand Meridian Hotel with its golden lights and its expensive cars and its world of wealth and privilege, and followed the officer to the patrol car. As they drove toward the station, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text. He pulled it out and saw it was from his boss at the construction site. Saw the news. "You okay? Take tomorrow off if you need it." News? What news? He opened his phone's browser and searched his name. The results made his stomach drop. Hero security guard saves CEO from kidnappers. Single father fights off armed men in daring rescue man risks life to save billionaire outside luxury hotel. There were already articles, already photos, grainy cell phone footage someone had captured from inside the hotel showing Ethan tackling the first kidnapper. Another shot of him holding Isabella Ford after the attack, both of them soaked and bloody and alive. He was already famous. He was already a story. And Ethan realized with a sinking feeling in his gut that his quiet, anonymous life, the life where he just worked hard and raised his son and minded his own business, was over. Everything was about to change. He just didn't know how much. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Ethan sat in a hard plastic chair in an interview room, his bandaged arm throbbing in rhythm with his pulse, while Detective Sarah Martinez asked him the same questions for what felt like the 100th time. What did the men look like? What did they say? Did he notice any distinguishing features? Vehicle details? Anything at all that might help identify the attackers? He answered everything as thoroughly as he could, but the truth was it had all happened so fast. A blur of motion and violence that his brain had barely had time to process, let alone catalog with the kind of detail the detective needed. "You did good, Mr. Cole," Detective Martinez finally said, closing her notebook. She was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Real good. Most people would have frozen or run the other way. You probably saved Ms. Ford's life tonight." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "You did what most people wish they would do. There's a difference." She stood, extending her hand. "We'll be in touch if we need anything else. In the meantime, get some rest. Get that arm looked at properly. And Mr. Cole?" She paused at the door. "Watch out for the reporters. This story is already everywhere, and they're going to want a piece of you." He left the station just after 2 in the morning. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets slick and reflective under the streetlights. True to the detective's warning, there were 3 news vans still parked outside, reporters and cameramen waiting despite the late hour. The moment Ethan emerged, they swarmed. "Mr. Cole! Mr. Cole! Can you tell us what happened tonight? How does it feel to be a hero? Did you know who Isabella Ford was when you saved her? Can we get a statement?" Microphones thrust toward his face. Camera lights blinded him. Ethan held up his good hand, shaking his head. "No comment, please. I just want to go home to my son." "Is it true you're a single father? Did Mrs. Ford offer you a reward? What were you thinking when you ran toward those armed men?" He pushed through the crowd, keeping his head down, not answering. His truck was parked 2 blocks away. He'd had to leave it when the police brought him to the station. By the time he reached it, his shirt was soaked through with sweat despite the cool night air, and his hands were shaking again. He sat behind the wheel for a long moment, just breathing, trying to collect himself. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Text messages, missed calls, notifications from social media accounts he barely used. Everyone wanted something from him. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Everyone except the one person who mattered. Ethan pulled up Mrs. Chen's contact and sent her a quick text. "On my way." The drive to her apartment took 15 minutes. She lived in the same building as Ethan and Liam, just 2 floors down, and she'd been a godsend ever since Sarah left. A widow in her 70s with grandchildren scattered across the country, she'd taken to Liam like he was her own, never asking for much in return, always ready with a kind word or a home-cooked meal. She opened the door before he could knock, her face creased with worry. "Ethan, oh my goodness, look at you. Come in, come in." "I'm sorry it's so late, Mrs. Chen." "Hush, I saw the news. I saw what you did." She pulled him inside, her small hands surprisingly strong as she guided him to her couch. "Sit down. Let me look at that arm. The paramedics already—" "Sit!" He sat. She examined the bandage with practiced efficiency, tisking softly. "You need to keep this clean and dry. Change the dressing every day. And you need to see a doctor tomorrow for stitches, yes?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't yes, ma'am me. I'm serious, Ethan. Infections are no joke." She disappeared into her kitchen and returned with a glass of water and 2 pills. "For the pain, don't argue." He took them without protest, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. His whole body ached. His arm felt like it was on fire. His head was pounding. "Liam?" he asked. "Sleeping like an angel. I put him in the guest room. He doesn't know anything about what happened, and I think we should keep it that way for now. Let him wake up naturally, have breakfast, then you can decide what to tell him." Ethan nodded gratefully. "Thank you. I don't know what I'd do without you." Mrs. Chen's expression softened. She sat down beside him, patting his knee. "You're a good man, Ethan Cole. Your father would be proud." His throat tightened. He hadn't expected that to hit so hard, but it did, like a fist to the chest. "I hope so. I know so." She stood, smoothing her house dress. "Now, you sleep on the couch tonight. I won't have you going upstairs and collapsing in your apartment. In the morning, we'll figure everything out." He wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some shred of independence, but he was too tired, too wrung out. So he just nodded and let her bring him a pillow and blanket, let her fuss over him like the mother he'd lost when he was 20, and when she finally turned off the lights and shuffled back to her bedroom, Ethan lay in the darkness and let the reality of what had happened wash over him. He'd saved someone's life tonight. He'd risked his own life for a complete stranger, and now everything was going to change. He just hoped he was ready for it. Sleep came in fragments, interrupted by dreams of black SUVs and masked men and a woman in a crimson coat falling. Each time he jerked awake, his heart racing, his arm throbbing, disoriented until he remembered where he was. By the time dawn light crept through Mrs. Chen's curtains, he'd maybe managed 3 hours of actual rest. He heard movement in the guest room, small feet padding across the floor. A moment later, Liam appeared in the doorway, his hair sticking up in every direction, his pajamas rumpled, his favorite stuffed bear tucked under one arm. "Dad?" His voice was small, confused. "Why are you here? Where's Mrs. Chen?" Ethan sat up, wincing as the movement pulled at his injured arm. "Hey, buddy, come here." Liam crossed the room and climbed onto the couch, snuggling against Ethan's good side. He smelled like Mrs. Chen's lavender laundry detergent and the strawberry shampoo Ethan bought because it was Liam's favorite. "I had to work really late last night," Ethan said carefully. "So Mrs. Chen let me crash here instead of going all the way upstairs. You sleep okay?" "Uh-huh." Liam's eyes found the bandage on Ethan's arm, and they went wide. "Dad, what happened to your arm?" "Oh, this? Just a little accident at work. Nothing serious." "Does it hurt?" "A little bit. But I'll be fine." Liam's lower lip trembled. "You promise?" Ethan pulled his son closer, pressing a kiss to the top of his head. "I promise, Liam. I'm okay. Everything's okay." Mrs. Chen emerged from her bedroom, already dressed despite the early hour. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said brightly to Liam. "How about I make us some pancakes for breakfast?" "Pancakes!" Liam scrambled off the couch, his worry about Ethan's arm forgotten in the face of his favorite breakfast food. "Can we have chocolate chips in them?" "If your dad says it's okay." Liam looked at Ethan with those big, hopeful eyes that could convince him to do just about anything. "Please, Dad?" "Chocolate chip pancakes sound perfect, buddy." While Mrs. Chen and Liam headed to the kitchen, Ethan checked his phone. The number of notifications had multiplied overnight. His voicemail was full. His inbox was overflowing. And there, near the top of his messages, was one from an unknown number that made him pause. "Mr. Cole, this is Marcus Webb, head of security for Ms. Isabella Ford. She would like to speak with you at your earliest convenience. Please call me at this number to arrange a meeting. It's important." Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. Part of him wanted to delete it, to pretend last night had been a dream, to just go back to his normal life of work and bills and bedtime stories. But he knew that wasn't possible anymore. The world had shifted, and there was no putting it back the way it was. He glanced toward the kitchen, where he could hear Liam chattering excitedly about something that happened at school yesterday, Mrs. Chen responding with warm enthusiasm. His son was happy, safe, loved. That was all that mattered. Ethan typed a quick response. "I can meet today if needed. Let me know when and where." The reply came almost instantly. 2 p.m. The Mary's Hospital, private wing. Ask for Ms. Ford's room at the main desk. "Thank you, Mr. Cole." Hospital. Right. Isabella Ford had been taken to the hospital last night. He'd been so focused on his own situation, on getting through the police interviews and getting home to Liam, that he hadn't really thought about how she was doing. Had she been injured? Was she okay? The guilt settled in his stomach like a stone. Breakfast was a warm, domestic affair that felt surreal given everything that had happened. Liam ate his pancakes with such enthusiasm that he got chocolate on his nose, making both Ethan and Mrs. Chen laugh. For those few minutes, sitting at her small kitchen table with morning sunlight streaming through the windows, Ethan could almost pretend everything was normal. But then his phone rang. He checked the caller ID and grimaced. It was Jerry, his supervisor at the construction site. Ethan stepped into the living room to take the call. Jerry, hey. Ethan, Jesus Christ, man, are you okay? I've been seeing your face all over the news this morning. They're calling you a hero. I'm fine, just a cut on my arm. I'll be back to work as soon as. No, no, no. Take the week off. Paid. Don't argue with me on this. Jerry's voice was firm but kind. You saved someone's life, Ethan. You need time to recover. Besides, with that arm, you'd be useless on the site anyway. No offense. None taken. But Jerry, I can't afford to take a week off. I've got rent coming up and Liam needs. Paid, Ethan. I said paid. The company's covering it. Hell, the owner saw the news and personally called me this morning to make sure you were taken care of. So rest, heal, and we'll see you next Monday. Got it? Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Yeah, got it. Thanks, Jerry. Thank you. What you did was incredible. Really incredible. After the call ended, Ethan stood in Mrs. Chen's living room, staring at his phone. A paid week off. That was one problem solved, but he still had his night security job, and he doubted he'd be getting the same accommodation there. He'd have to call them, explain the situation, hope they'd understand. Dad? Liam appeared beside him, syrup still on his chin. Can we go to the park today, please? Ethan checked the time, 9:30 in the morning. He had to meet Isabella Ford at 2. That gave him a few hours. Yeah, buddy, let's go to the park. Liam's face lit up like Christmas morning. Yes, can I bring my soccer ball? Of course. They went upstairs to their apartment so Ethan could shower and change. The wound on his arm made everything difficult. He had to keep it dry, had to move carefully, had to bite back curses when he accidentally pulled it the wrong way. But he managed, eventually emerging in clean jeans and a t-shirt that hid the bandage under its sleeve. The park was only a few blocks away. A small patch of green with a playground, a basketball court, and an open field where kids played soccer and threw frisbees. On a Saturday morning, it was busy with families enjoying the post-storm sunshine. Ethan and Liam found an empty spot on the grass, and Liam immediately started kicking his soccer ball around, his energy boundless in that way only 7-year-olds could manage. Ethan sat on a bench nearby, content to watch his son play, soaking in this moment of normalcy. But normalcy was short-lived. Excuse me, are you Ethan Cole? He looked up to find a young woman standing there with her phone out, her expression eager. I am. Can I help you? Oh my God, you are. I saw you on the news this morning. What you did was amazing. Can I take a picture with you? My friends are never going to believe this. Before Ethan could respond, she was handing her phone to a nearby stranger and positioning herself next to him, her arm around his shoulders. The camera flashed. Thank you so much. You're a real hero. She hurried off, already typing on her phone. Ethan sat there, stunned. This was going to be his life now, wasn't it? People recognizing him, wanting pictures, treating him like some kind of celebrity when all he'd done was help someone in trouble. Over the next hour, it happened 3 more times. Different people, same excitement, same requests for photos. By the 4th time, Liam had noticed and come running over. Dad, why does everyone want pictures with you? Ethan pulled his son onto his lap, suddenly feeling very tired. Something happened at work last night, Liam. I helped someone who was in trouble and I guess people saw it on the news. What kind of trouble? The kind that doesn't matter anymore because she's safe now. Was it scary? Ethan thought about the knife, the fight, the very real possibility that he could have died on that rain-slicked sidewalk. Yeah, buddy, it was scary, but sometimes we have to do scary things to help people. Liam was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he threw his arms around Ethan's neck, hugging him tightly. I'm glad you didn't get hurt bad. Me too, Liam. Me too. They stayed at the park until noon, then stopped at a deli on the way home for sandwiches. Ethan had to fend off 2 more people who recognized him, including the woman behind the counter who insisted his meal was on the house. Heroes don't pay, she declared, refusing to take his money. Back at the apartment, Ethan settled Liam in front of the TV with his sandwich and a cartoon, then retreated to his bedroom to get ready for the hospital visit. He changed into his one good button-down shirt, the one he wore to parent-teacher conferences and the occasional job interview, and tried to make his hair cooperate. The bandage on his arm was visible beneath the rolled-up sleeve, white and stark against his tanned skin. He looked at himself in the mirror and wondered what Isabella Ford would see. A nobody? A good Samaritan? A man who'd stumbled into her world by accident and would stumble right back out again once they'd exchanged pleasantries? Probably all of the above. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch Liam again, and Ethan caught a bus to St. Mary's Hospital. He could have driven, but parking was expensive, and he was suddenly very aware of every dollar in his bank account. Hero or not, bills still needed to be paid. The hospital was one of the nicer ones in the city, all modern architecture and manicured grounds. The main lobby was bright and clean, with artwork on the walls and a massive flower arrangement on the reception desk. Ethan approached the desk, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm here to see Isabella Ford. I was told to ask at the main desk." The receptionist's eyes widened with recognition. "Mr. Cole." "Yes, we've been expecting you. Please take the elevator to the 5th floor. Someone will meet you there." The 5th floor was quiet, clearly a private wing where wealthy patients paid for peace and discretion. The moment the elevator doors opened, a man in a dark suit stepped forward. "Mr. Cole, I'm Marcus Webb, head of Ms. Ford's security." He was tall, broad-shouldered, probably ex-military given the way he carried himself. His handshake was firm but respectful. "Thank you for coming. Please, follow me." They walked down a hallway that looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital, artwork on the walls, plush carpet underfoot, soft lighting. Marcus stopped at a door near the end and knocked gently. "Come in," a woman's voice called from inside. Marcus opened the door and gestured for Ethan to enter. The room was spacious, with a large window overlooking the city, comfortable furniture, and yes, a hospital bed, but one that looked far more comfortable than anything Ethan had ever seen in a medical facility. And sitting in a chair beside the window, wrapped in a silk robe over her hospital gown, was Isabella Ford. She looked different in daylight. Her dark hair was pulled back, and there was a small bandage on her temple, but her eyes were clear and sharp as they found his. She stood the moment he entered, and Ethan noticed she moved stiffly, like someone who'd been through an ordeal and was still feeling its effects. "Mr. Cole." Her voice was composed, but there was emotion underneath it. "Thank you for coming." "Ms. Ford, how are you feeling?" "Better than I have any right to feel, thanks to you." She gestured to a chair across from hers. "Please, sit. Would you like something to drink? Coffee? Water?" "Water would be great, thank you." Marcus produced a bottle of water seemingly from nowhere and handed it to Ethan before quietly exiting the room, closing the door behind him. Suddenly it was just the two of them, a security guard and a CEO, in a hospital room that cost more per night than Ethan made in a month. Isabella sat back down, studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "They told me you refused to talk to the press." "I don't need the attention. I just did what anyone would do." "That's the second time you've said that." She leaned forward slightly. "But it's not true, Mr. Cole. Most people wouldn't have done what you did. Most people would have run the other way or called for help or frozen in fear. But you? You ran toward danger. You put yourself between me and those men. You got hurt protecting me." Her eyes dropped to the bandage on his arm. "How bad is it?" 15 stitches? I'll be fine." 15. She said the word like it physically hurt. "You took a knife wound meant for me." "Actually, I think the knife was just meant to stop me. But either way, it's healing." She was quiet for a moment, her hands folded in her lap, her expression unreadable. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I don't remember everything clearly. The police said I was in shock, but I remember you holding me after it was over. I remember feeling safe for the first time since those hands grabbed me. And I remember thinking, who is this man? Why would he risk everything for a stranger?" Ethan took a sip of water, buying himself time. "I have a son. He's 7. And I thought, what if someone grabbed him? What if he was in danger and no one helped because it wasn't their problem? I'd want someone to step up, so I did." Something shifted in Isabella's expression, a crack in the composed facade. "What's your son's name?" "Liam." "Does he know what you did?" "Not really. I told him I helped someone at work. He knows I got hurt, but I didn't give him details. He's just a kid. He doesn't need to know how scary the world can be." "You're protecting him, the way you protected me." It's what fathers do. It's what decent people do. Isabella stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. From this height, you could see for miles the business district with its gleaming towers, the residential neighborhoods spreading out like a patchwork quilt, the river winding through it all like a silver thread. "I've lived in this city my entire life," she said quietly. "Built my company from nothing, worked 18-hour days, made decisions that affected thousands of people's lives. I always believed I was strong, capable, untouchable even." She turned to look at him. "Last night, I learned how wrong I was, how vulnerable we all are, how quickly everything can be taken away. Did they tell you anything about who those men were or why they targeted you?" "The police have some theories: corporate espionage, kidnapping for ransom, a competitor trying to intimidate me. Take your pick. I've made enemies in my career. That's the cost of success in my world." Her jaw tightened. "But they almost succeeded. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't acted—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. "But I was there. And you're safe. Because of you." She returned to her chair, sitting down with the careful movements of someone still healing. "The press is calling you a hero. My board of directors wants to give you a medal. My security team wants to hire you. Everyone has an opinion about what should happen next." She paused. "But none of them asked what you want." Ethan blinked, surprised. "What I want?" "Yes. You saved my life, Mr. Cole. That creates a debt I can never truly repay. But I'd like to try. So tell me, what do you want?" It was such a strange question. What did he want? He wanted Liam to grow up happy and safe. He wanted to stop worrying about money every single day. He wanted to sleep through the night without nightmares. He wanted— "I don't want anything," he said finally. "I mean, I appreciate the offer, but I didn't help you to get something out of it." "I know that, which is exactly why I want to help you." Isabella's gaze was unwavering. "I've already looked into your situation. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but I needed to understand who you are. Single father, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, barely scraping by despite working yourself to exhaustion. Your son attends public school where the classrooms are overcrowded and the programs are underfunded. You're 3 months behind on your truck payment and 2 months behind on medical bills from when Liam had pneumonia last winter." Ethan's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "You had no right." "You're right. I didn't. But I needed to know." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Mr. Cole? I see someone who embodies everything I claim my company stands for: integrity, courage, putting others first. But while I talk about those values in boardrooms and at charity galas, you actually live them. Every single day. Ms. Ford, please let me finish." She took a breath. "I want to offer you a job. Not as security, not as some token gesture to make myself feel better. I want you to head my new public safety foundation. It's an initiative I've been planning for months, providing resources and training for people who want to help their communities, funding neighborhood watch programs, supporting first responders. I need someone to run it who actually understands what it means to protect people, someone who doesn't do it for glory or recognition, but because it's the right thing to do." Ethan stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "You want me to run a foundation? The salary would be $150,000 a year, plus benefits, full health insurance for you and Liam, a company car, paid vacation, everything you need to actually have a life instead of just surviving." She pulled a folder from the table beside her chair and handed it to him. "This is a formal offer. Take it home. Think about it. Talk to your son. But know that this isn't charity, Mr. Cole. This is me recognizing talent and character when I see it. You'd be earning every penny." Ethan opened the folder with shaking hands. The number at the top of the contract made his vision blur. $150,000. That was more than he made at both his jobs combined. That was a life. A real life. "I don't have experience running anything," he said, his voice rough. "I'm just a guy who shows up and does the work." And that's exactly what this job needs. Not another corporate executive who sees it as a line on their resume. Someone who genuinely cares. Isabella's expression softened. I almost died last night, Mr. Cole. That kind of experience changes your perspective. I've spent my whole life building my company, accumulating wealth and power, but what does any of it matter if I'm not using it to actually help people? You reminded me what real courage looks like, what real goodness looks like. Let me try to do something meaningful with that reminder. Ethan looked down at the contract, then back up at her. Why do I feel like you're the one saving me now? Because maybe we both needed saving, just in different ways. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the offer hanging between them. Outside the window, the city continued its endless motion, cars and people and lives intersecting and diverging in the great dance of existence. Somewhere down there, Liam was probably playing with Mrs. Chen, happy and oblivious to how dramatically his father's life was about to change. Can I really think about it? Ethan asked. This is overwhelming. I know. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless. Isabella stood, extending her hand. Thank you for coming, Mr. Cole. And thank you for saving my life. Whatever you decide about the job, that gratitude will never change. Ethan shook her hand, feeling the strength in her grip despite her injuries. You would have done the same for someone else. I'd like to think so, but I'm not sure I would have had your courage. She walked him to the door. One more thing. The police are still investigating, and until they catch those men, I'm considered at risk. I have security now, obviously, but I wanted you to know, if you ever feel threatened, if anyone approaches you or your son, call Marcus immediately. She pressed a business card into his hand. His number. He'll make sure you're protected. The thought sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He hadn't considered that the kidnappers might come after him, might see him as a loose end or a witness to eliminate, might see Liam as leverage. You think they'd come after me? I don't know, but I won't take chances with your safety, not after what you did for me. Marcus appeared in the hallway as if summoned, and he escorted Ethan back to the elevator. As the doors closed and the hospital fell away above him, Ethan looked down at the folder in his hands and the business card with Marcus's number. Everything had changed. 24 hours ago, he'd been a nobody with 2 jobs and a mountain of bills. Now he was a hero with a job offer that could transform his entire life. The bus ride home felt surreal. Ethan sat in the back, the folder hidden in his jacket, watching the city pass by the window. He saw the people on the streets, some dressed in business suits, some in work clothes like his, some struggling with bags of groceries or pushing strollers, all of them just trying to get by, all of them fighting their own battles. He'd been one of them his whole life. Could he really leave that world behind? When he got home, Mrs. Chen met him at the door with a knowing look. How was the meeting? Complicated. The best things usually are. She patted his arm. Liam is doing his homework at my table. Come have some tea and tell me what's on your mind. So he did. He sat at her small kitchen table, watching Liam sound out words in his reading assignment, and told Mrs. Chen everything. The job offer, the salary, the benefits, the impossible opportunity that had fallen into his lap because he'd done one good thing. She listened without interrupting, her weathered hands wrapped around her teacup, her eyes gentle and wise. What does your heart tell you? She asked when he'd finished. My heart says I'd be crazy to turn it down. But my head says I'm not qualified, that I'll fail, that I'll let everyone down. And what does Liam need? Ethan looked at his son, bent over his workbook with his tongue poking out in concentration, and felt his chest tighten. He needs stability, security, a father who doesn't come home exhausted every night, a future that doesn't involve watching me work myself to death like my dad did. Then you have your answer. It's scary, Mrs. Chen. What if I'm not good enough? She reached across the table and took his hand. Ethan, you ran toward danger to save a stranger's life. You took a knife wound protecting someone you'd never met. You worked 2 jobs to give your son everything he needs while never complaining, never giving up. If that's not good enough, then nothing is. That night, after Liam was asleep, Ethan sat on his couch with the folder open on his lap. He read through every page of the contract, trying to understand all the legal language, all the clauses and stipulations. It was real. The offer was real. His phone buzzed with another message, another reporter wanting an interview, another stranger congratulating him, another reminder that his old life was gone, whether he took this job or not. He thought about his father, working those two jobs until his heart gave out. He thought about the promise he'd made at his father's funeral, that he'd be there for his own son, that he wouldn't let work consume him the way it had consumed his dad. And he thought about Isabella Ford's words. You reminded me what real courage looks like. Maybe accepting help when you needed it was its own kind of courage. Maybe letting someone change your life wasn't weakness, but wisdom. Maybe this was the universe giving him a second chance, and he'd be a fool to throw it away out of pride or fear. Ethan pulled out his phone and typed a message to the number on Isabella's business card. Ms. Ford, this is Ethan Cole. I've thought about your offer. If it's still available, I'd like to accept. When can I start? The response came within minutes. Monday morning. Welcome to the team, Mr. Cole. You're going to change a lot of lives, starting with your own. Ethan set the phone down and looked around his small apartment, the secondhand furniture, the water stain on the ceiling he'd been meaning to fix, the stack of past due bills on the counter. This had been his life for 3 years, his entire world. But not anymore. He walked to Liam's bedroom and stood in the doorway, watching his son sleep. In the dim glow of the nightlight, Liam looked so small, so innocent, so full of possibility. Things are going to be different now, buddy, Ethan whispered. Better, I promise. And for the first time in a very long time, Ethan Cole believed in promises again. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything feel new and possible. Ethan stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. He'd bought it yesterday at a discount store, navy blue with thin silver stripes, along with 2 dress shirts and a pair of slacks that actually fit properly. The clothes had cost more than he usually spent in a month, but Mrs. Chen had insisted, pressing $200 into his hand despite his protests. You're starting a new life, she'd said firmly. You need to look the part. Now staring at his reflection, Ethan barely recognized himself. The tie sat straight, the shirt was pressed, his hair was combed back instead of falling into his eyes. He looked like someone who belonged in an office, someone who made decisions that mattered. He looked like someone who wasn't him. Dad, you look fancy! Ethan turned to find Liam standing in the doorway, already dressed in his school uniform, his backpack slung over one shoulder. His son's eyes were wide with amazement, and there was something in his expression that Ethan had never seen before. Pride. You think so? Ethan asked, crouching down to Liam's level. You look like a businessman, like the guys on TV. Liam reached out and touched the tie. Is this for your new job? They'd talked about it over the weekend, how Dad was going to start working at a different place, how they'd have more time together, how things were going to change. Ethan had kept it simple, age-appropriate, not wanting to overwhelm his 7-year-old with details about foundations and CEOs and the fact that their entire financial situation had just transformed overnight. Yeah, buddy, first day. Are you scared? The question caught Ethan off guard. He'd been so focused on appearing confident, on being the strong father Liam needed, that he hadn't admitted his fear even to himself. But looking into his son's honest eyes, he realized lying would do neither of them any good. A little bit, Ethan admitted. Starting something new is always scary. But you know what? Being scared doesn't mean you don't do it. It just means you're brave enough to try. Liam considered this, his small face serious. Then he wrapped his arms around Ethan's neck in a fierce hug. You're the bravest dad in the whole world. Ethan held his son close, breathing in the smell of children's shampoo and toothpaste, feeling the small heart beating against his chest. This was why he was doing it, all of it. The new job, the scary changes, stepping into a world he didn't understand. For this little boy who believed his father could do anything. Come on, Ethan said, pulling back and ruffling Liam's hair. Let's get you to school. Yet the morning routine was familiar, even if everything else felt strange. Ethan made breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, while Liam chattered about his upcoming class field trip to the Science Museum. They walked the 3 blocks to Liam's elementary school, Ethan's hand warm around his son's smaller one. At the gate, Liam hugged him goodbye and ran off to join his friends, leaving Ethan standing alone on the sidewalk. His truck sat at the curb, faithful and battered. But tucked in Ethan's pocket was a set of keys to a company car, a modest sedan that Marcus had delivered to his building yesterday evening. It sat in the parking lot now, dark blue and clean, and so different from his rust-spotted pickup that Ethan had walked past it twice before realizing it was his. He chose the truck for today. One last ride in the vehicle that had carried him through 3 years of struggling and surviving. Tomorrow, he could be the guy with the company car. Today, he needed to hold on to a piece of who he'd been. The drive to Ford Global Holdings headquarters took 30 minutes through morning traffic. The building rose from the downtown skyline like a monument to success, 40 stories of steel and glass that caught the morning sun and threw it back in brilliant shards of light. Ethan had passed this building 1,000 times in his life, never once imagining he'd walk through its front doors as anything other than a delivery person or maintenance worker. He parked in the underground garage, following the directions Marcus had sent him, and took the elevator to the main lobby. The space was enormous, with marble floors and modern art installations, and a massive reception desk where 3 professionally dressed women handled a constant stream of visitors. Ethan approached, his heart hammering. "Hi, I'm Ethan Cole. I'm supposed to—" "Mr. Cole!" "Yes, we've been expecting you." The receptionist smiled warmly and handed him a badge already printed with his name and photo. "Take the elevator to the 37th floor. Ms. Ford's assistant will meet you there." The elevator was glass-walled, offering a dizzying view of the city as it climbed. Ethan watched the streets fall away below, watched the world get smaller, and tried to steady his breathing. He could do this. He'd faced armed kidnappers. He could handle an office job. The doors opened on the 37th floor to reveal a space that screamed executive privilege. Thick carpet, hushed voices, the subtle scent of expensive coffee. A woman in her 50s with silver hair and a no-nonsense expression stood waiting. "Mr. Cole, I'm Patricia Reeves, Ms. Ford's executive assistant. Welcome to Ford Global Holdings." Her handshake was brisk and businesslike. "Ms. Ford is finishing a conference call, but she asked me to show you around first. This way, please." Patricia led him through a maze of corridors, pointing out conference rooms and break areas and offices occupied by people who looked far more qualified than Ethan felt. Everyone they passed stared at him, some with curiosity, some with recognition, all with interest. Word had clearly spread about who he was and why he was here. "This will be your office," Patricia said, opening a door near the end of the hallway. Ethan stepped inside and felt his breath catch. It wasn't huge, but it was bigger than his apartment's living room. Windows overlooked the city. A desk made of dark wood sat in the center with a leather chair behind it and a computer already set up. Bookshelves lined one wall, empty and waiting to be filled. On the desk sat a welcome basket filled with office supplies and a card that read, "Welcome to the team, IF." "Ms. Ford wanted you to have everything you need to get started," Patricia said. "Your computer login is in that envelope on the desk. It will be by this afternoon to help you set up your accounts and access. You have a meeting with Ms. Ford at 10, then lunch with the department heads at noon, and at 2 o'clock you'll meet with the Foundation's advisory board." Ethan's head was spinning. The Foundation already has an advisory board? "Ms. Ford doesn't do anything halfway, Mr. Cole. When she decides something matters, she moves quickly." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're here because she believes in you. That's not something she gives lightly. Trust her judgment, even if you don't trust your own yet." She left him alone in the office. Ethan stood in the center of the room, turning slowly, trying to absorb the reality of his new life. Through the window, he could see the entire city spread out below. The neighborhoods where he'd grown up, the construction sites where he'd worked, the streets he'd walked when he couldn't afford gas. All of it visible from up here, but distant, separate. He pulled out his phone and took a picture of the view, then sent it to Mrs. Chen with a message. "My office! Can you believe it?" Her response came immediately. "I always believed it. Now you need to believe it too." Ethan spent the next hour exploring his computer, reading through the files Patricia had left for him about the Public Safety Foundation. The scope was impressive: partnerships with police departments, funding for community programs, grants for neighborhood watch groups, training initiatives for civilians who wanted to help keep their communities safe. It was ambitious and meaningful, and exactly the kind of work that could actually make a difference. It was also terrifying in its scope. How was he supposed to manage all of this? At 10 o'clock sharp, Patricia appeared at his door. "Miss Ford is ready for you." Isabella's office was at the far end of the floor, taking up an entire corner with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views. She stood when he entered, moving with less stiffness than she had at the hospital. The bandage was gone from her temple, leaving just a small mark that makeup mostly covered. "Ethan." She smiled, and it transformed her face from merely beautiful to genuinely warm. "How are you settling in?" "Still trying to convince myself this is real," he admitted. "I felt the same way my first day here. Of course, that was 30 years ago, and the building was half this size." She gestured to the chairs by her window. "Sit. Let's talk before your schedule gets crazy." He sat, and she joined him, both of them looking out at the city rather than at each other. It made the conversation feel less formal, more genuine. "I want to be honest with you about something," Isabella said. "When I offered you this job, it wasn't just gratitude, though that's certainly part of it. I've been planning this foundation for 2 years, but I couldn't find the right person to lead it. Every candidate was qualified on paper, business degrees, management experience, impressive resumes, but none of them understood what it actually means to protect people, to sacrifice for strangers, to put yourself on the line because it's right, not because it's profitable. And you think I understand that? I know you do. I watched you do it." She turned to look at him directly. "I'm not going to lie and say this will be easy. You're going to have moments where you feel completely out of your depth, where you question every decision, where you wonder if I made a mistake choosing you." "I'm already there," Ethan said quietly. "Good. That means you're taking it seriously." Isabella's expression was earnest. "But here's what I know that you don't know yet. Character can't be taught. Integrity can't be trained. You either have it or you don't. And you have it, Ethan. Everything else, the management skills, the business knowledge, the political navigation, those can be learned. Patricia will help you. Marcus will help you. I'll help you. You're not alone in this." "Why does this matter so much to you?" Ethan asked. "You could have just sent me a check and called it even." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. "My father built this company from nothing. He was a good man, principled and fair, but he died when I was 23 and suddenly everything fell to me. I spent the next 3 decades proving I deserved to be here, that I wasn't just riding on his legacy. I made this company bigger, more profitable, more powerful." She paused. "But somewhere along the way, I forgot why it mattered. I forgot that money and success mean nothing if you're not using them to make the world better. That night, when those men grabbed me, all I could think was, this is how it ends. This is my legacy. A headline about a kidnapping. And then you appeared. I was just in the right place. No, you were the right person." She turned to face him fully. "You reminded me what courage looks like when it's not calculated or strategic. You showed me that some people still act on pure instinct to help others, even when it costs them everything. I want to build something that honors that creates more people like you." The weight of her words settled in Ethan's chest. This wasn't just a job. This was Isabella Ford's attempt to reclaim her own sense of purpose, and he was somehow central to that journey. "I won't let you down," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "I know." She stood, extending her hand. "Now come on. We have department heads to meet, and they're going to want to size you up. Fair warning, some of them think I'm crazy for hiring someone without traditional credentials. Prove them wrong." The lunch meeting was held in a private dining room on the executive floor. Ethan found himself seated at a long table with 7 other people, vice presidents and directors with titles he barely understood. They were professional and polite, but he could feel their skepticism like a physical presence in the room. "So, Mr. Cole," said a man named Richard Chen, VP of Operations, "tell us about your background in nonprofit management." "I don't have one," Ethan said honestly. "I have a background in showing up and doing the work that needs to be done, and looking out for people who need looking out for. Ms. Ford seems to think that's what this foundation needs." "With all due respect," said a woman named Jennifer Martinez, Director of Community Relations, "running a multi-million-dollar initiative requires more than good intentions. It requires strategy, budgeting, stakeholder management, all of which he'll learn," Isabella interrupted smoothly. She'd joined them halfway through the meal, taking her seat at the head of the table with the casual authority of someone who'd never doubted her right to be there. "And all of which are meaningless without the right foundation. Ethan understands the communities we're trying to serve because he's lived in them. He understands the stakes because he's risked everything to protect a stranger. That's not something you can teach in business school. But Ms. Ford, Richard started. Richard, do you remember why you joined this company? Isabella's voice was gentle but firm. You told me in your interview that you wanted to work somewhere that made a difference, that actually helped people instead of just maximizing shareholder value. That's exactly what Ethan is here to do. Give him a chance to prove himself before you dismiss him. The room fell silent. Ethan could feel eyes on him, measuring, judging, waiting to see if he'd crack under the pressure. I know I have a lot to learn, Ethan said, looking around the table. And I'm not going to pretend I know everything about running a foundation or managing budgets or whatever else this job requires, but I do know what it's like to work 3 jobs and still worry about keeping the lights on. I know what it's like to live in neighborhoods where people are scared to let their kids play outside. I know what it's like to see someone in trouble and have to decide in a split second whether you're the kind of person who helps or the kind who looks away. He paused. Ms. Ford is betting that my experience is valuable. I'm going to prove her right. But I can't do it alone. I need help from people who know this world. So I'm not asking you to believe in me yet. I'm just asking you to give me the chance to earn it. Another silence, but this one felt different, less hostile, more considering. Jennifer Martinez was the first to speak. Community relations will support you however we can. If you need insights into the neighborhoods we're targeting, I can provide detailed demographic data and partnership opportunities. Thank you, Ethan said, and meant it. One by one, the others offered their support. Some enthusiastically, some grudgingly, but all of them making the commitment. By the time lunch ended, Ethan felt like he'd just survived a gauntlet, but one he'd managed to navigate without completely humiliating himself. The afternoon meeting with the Foundation's advisory board was less contentious, but more overwhelming. These were community leaders, retired police chiefs, nonprofit directors, and activists who'd agreed to help guide the Foundation's work. They had strong opinions about what needed to be done and weren't shy about expressing them. We need to focus on youth programs, said a woman named Diane Tucker, who ran a community center in the South Side. Get to kids before they get into trouble. Prevention is important, but what about supporting people who are actively trying to make their neighborhoods safer? Countered Marcus Webb, who apparently served on the board as well as heading Isabella's security. Neighborhood watch programs need resources and training. Both are important, Ethan found himself saying. Everyone turned to look at him. He swallowed hard and continued. We can't just focus on one thing. Communities need multiple layers of support. Programs for kids, yes, but also resources for adults who want to help. Better relationships between residents and police, improved street lighting and safety infrastructure. It all works together. Exactly, said a retired police captain named James Rodriguez. Security isn't just about law enforcement. It's about creating environments where people feel safe and empowered. The meeting lasted 2 hours, and by the end, Ethan's head was swimming with ideas and initiatives and partnerships. But underneath the overwhelm, he felt something else: excitement. This work mattered. It could actually change lives. When he finally made it back to his office at 4:30, Patricia was waiting with a stack of folders. These are the grant applications we've received so far. You'll need to review them and decide which ones to fund. There's also a request for you to speak at a community forum next week, and 3 interview requests from local news stations. Ethan stared at the pile. All of this today? Welcome to executive life, Mr. Cole. The work never stops. But she smiled as she said it, taking some of the sting out. Don't try to do it all at once. Prioritize. Delegate. And don't be afraid to ask for help. She left, and Ethan sat behind his desk, looking at the folders and the computer and the view of the city beyond his window. Somewhere down there, Liam was getting out of school, probably heading to Mrs. Chen's apartment for his snack and homework time. In a few hours, Ethan would pick him up, and they'd have dinner together, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan wouldn't have to rush off to a second job afterward. He pulled out his phone and sent Liam a quick text. How was school, buddy? The response came quickly. Good. We learned about planets. When are you coming home? 6 o'clock. Want to get pizza for dinner? Yes, yes, yes! Ethan smiled and set the phone down. Then he opened the first folder and started reading about a neighborhood watch program that needed funding for communication equipment and training. The proposal was well written and clearly thoughtful. The neighborhood was one Ethan knew, had lived near for 2 years before finding his current apartment. He could picture the streets they were trying to protect, could imagine the families who lived there, working hard and trying to keep their kids safe in a world that sometimes felt more dangerous every day. He marked the application for approval and moved on to the next one. The week passed in a blur of meetings and learning and moments where Ethan felt completely out of his depth, followed by moments where everything suddenly clicked into place. Patricia became his lifeline, appearing at his office door whenever he looked particularly lost to offer guidance or connect him with someone who could help. Marcus stopped by regularly to discuss security concerns and share his expertise from 20 years in law enforcement. Isabella checked in daily, sometimes just poking her head into his office to ask how he was doing, sometimes sitting down for long conversations about the foundation's direction. By Friday, Ethan had approved 3 grants, declined 2 that didn't meet the foundation's criteria, and scheduled site visits to 4 different community programs. He'd also given his first interview to a local news station, stumbling through questions about heroism and second chances while trying not to look terrified on camera. "You did fine," Isabella assured him after watching the interview in her office. "Authentic. That's what people respond to." "I sounded like an idiot. You sounded like a real person. That's rarer than you think in this world." She closed her laptop and looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "Are you happy? With the job, I mean. I know it's only been a week, but I need to know if this is working for you." Ethan thought about it carefully. "I'm terrified most of the time. I feel like I'm constantly about to make a huge mistake. Half the people here probably still think you're crazy for hiring me." He paused. "But yeah, I'm happy. Or at least I think I'm going to be. This work matters, Ms. Ford. It's hard and overwhelming, and sometimes I want to hide under my desk, but it matters." She smiled, and there was relief in it. "Good. Because I need you here, Ethan. This company needs you. The foundation needs you. And I think, whether you realize it yet or not, you need this too." That evening, Ethan picked up Liam from Mrs. Chen's apartment and took him out for their promised pizza. They sat in a booth at their favorite cheap pizza place, the one with the checkered tablecloths and the jukebox that only played songs from the 80s. And Liam told him everything about his week with the kind of enthusiasm only a 7-year-old could muster. And then Tommy said that Pluto isn't a planet anymore, but I said it is to a planet. And Miss Hernandez said we were both kind of right because it's a dwarf planet, and that's still a kind of planet. Right, Dad? Right, buddy. And I got 100 on my spelling test. Miss Hernandez put a sticker on it that says Super Speller, and I'm going to put it on my folder. I'm so proud of you, Liam. His son beamed, sauce on his chin, pure joy in his eyes. Are you still liking your new job, Dad? I am. It's different from what I used to do, but it's good. Do you still get to be a hero? The question caught Ethan off guard. What do you mean? Mrs. Chen showed me the newspaper. It had your picture, and it said you were a hero. Are you still a hero at your new job? Ethan reached across the table and took Liam's hand. Being a hero isn't about one big thing, buddy. It's about showing up every day and trying to help people, even in small ways. So yeah, I'm trying to be a hero, just a different kind. I think you're the best hero, Liam said seriously, because you're my dad. Later that night, after Liam was asleep and Ethan was finally alone with his thoughts, he stood at his apartment window looking out at the city. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with an email from Patricia, the schedule for next week. More meetings, more site visits, more opportunities to learn and grow, and maybe, just maybe, make a difference. His old life felt like it belonged to someone else now. The construction sites, the night security shifts, the constant exhaustion and worry, all of it was fading into memory, being replaced by something new and strange and full of possibility. But as he looked at his reflection in the dark window, Ethan recognized the person staring back at him. The tie was new, the expensive shirt was new, the office and the title and the salary were all new. But underneath it all, he was still the same person who'd sprinted into danger without thinking, still the same father who'd do anything for his son, still the same man who believed that helping people mattered more than helping yourself. Isabella Ford had seen that in him, had better foundation on it, and Ethan Cole was going to prove she hadn't made a mistake. His phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't an email. It was a text from an unknown number. "We know where you live. We know where your son goes to school. Stay out of what doesn't concern you." Ethan's blood turned to ice. The message included a photo, taken today, showing Liam walking out of his school, his backpack bouncing on his shoulders, completely unaware he was being photographed. With shaking hands, Ethan immediately called Marcus Webb. The phone rang once before Marcus answered. "Ethan, what's wrong? I just got a threat. They have a picture of Liam. They know where we live. Forward me that message immediately." Ethan did as instructed, then went to Liam's room. His son was sleeping peacefully, his stuffed bear clutched to his chest, completely unaware that danger had found them. Ethan stood in the doorway, his heart racing, every protective instinct screaming at him to grab Liam and run. But run where? If they knew where he lived and where Liam went to school, they could find them anywhere. There was a knock at the door, 3 sharp raps followed by 2 quick ones, the pattern Marcus had told him to listen for. Ethan looked through the peephole and saw 2 men in dark suits, both wearing earpieces, both with the kind of alert stance that spoke of military training. He opened the door. "Mr. Cole, I'm Agent Harrison, and this is Agent Kim. Mr. Webb sent us to provide security." The man who spoke was in his 30s, with sharp eyes that swept the apartment, cataloging everything. "We need to assess the situation and discuss next steps. Is your son here?" "He's asleep in his room." "Good. Let's keep it that way." They entered efficiently, and within minutes had checked every window, every door, every possible entry point. "Your apartment is secure for now, but we need to implement additional measures. Mr. Webb is on his way, and will discuss options with you." Marcus arrived 15 minutes later, his face grim. He sat down with Ethan at the kitchen table while the 2 agents positioned themselves by the windows and door. "The message came from a burner phone, untraceable," Marcus said, "but the threat is credible. The men who tried to take Isabella are still out there, and now they see you as a liability, someone who can identify them, testify against them." "What do I do?" Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. "How do I keep Liam safe?" "We move you both, tonight. Isabella has a secure property outside the city, gated community, 24-hour security, completely private. You and Liam stay there until we neutralize this threat. I can't just uproot him. He has school, friends, routines. He has a life," Marcus said firmly. "And right now, that life is in danger. We can arrange for a private tutor temporarily. Mrs. Chen can visit, but staying here isn't safe, Ethan. Not for you, and definitely not for your son." Ethan looked toward Liam's room, feeling his world cracking apart. He'd finally gotten them to a better place, finally found stability and security, and now it was all being torn away by faceless threats and violence that had followed him home from that rainy night outside the Grand Meridian Hotel. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "I brought this on us." "No. You saved someone's life. The fault lies with the men who tried to take it." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "I know this isn't what you signed up for, but Isabella won't let anything happen to you or Liam. You're under her protection now, which means you're under mine. And I promise you, we will keep you both safe." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He thought about his father, about the promise he'd made to always protect Liam, about being the kind of man who didn't run from responsibility, but also didn't needlessly endanger his child. "Okay," he said finally. "We'll go, but I need to pack some things, and I need to wake Liam gently. He's going to be scared. Take your time. We'll be here." Packing took 30 minutes. Ethan filled 2 suitcases with clothes and necessities, grabbed Liam's favorite toys and books, threw in school supplies, and the stuffed bear that Liam couldn't sleep without. Then he went to his son's room and sat on the edge of the bed. "Liam," he said softly, stroking his son's hair. "Buddy, wake up." Liam's eyes fluttered open, confused and sleepy. "Dad, is it morning?" "No, it's still night, but we need to take a little trip, okay? It's going to be an adventure." "Right now?" Liam sat up, rubbing his eyes. "In the middle of the night?" "Yeah." Ms. Ford, the lady I work for, she has a really cool house outside the city, and she invited us to stay there for a little while. It has a big yard and everything. Doesn't that sound fun?" Liam looked uncertain. "What about school?" "We'll figure that out, but right now I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" His son studied his face with those two perceptive eyes, and Ethan could see the moment Liam understood that something was wrong, even if he didn't understand what. "Are we safe, Dad?" Ethan pulled him into a tight hug. "I will always keep you safe, Liam. Always. That's a promise." They left the apartment at 2 in the morning, escorted by Marcus and his team. A black SUV waited at the curb, one of the good ones this time, with bulletproof glass and reinforced doors. Liam clutched his stuffed bear and stared out the window as they drove through the empty streets, leaving behind the only home he'd really known. Mrs. Chen was waiting in the lobby when they passed through, wrapped in her robe, her face tight with worry. Ethan had called her from upstairs, explaining what was happening. "You take care of my boys," she said fiercely to Marcus, "or you'll answer to me." "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied, and there was genuine respect in his voice. She hugged Ethan tightly, then knelt down to embrace Liam. "It's going to be all right, sweetheart. Your dad is the bravest man I know, and he's going to make sure you're safe. Be good for him, okay?" "Okay, Mrs. Chen." The drive took 45 minutes. They left the city lights behind, traveled through dark suburbs, and then into rolling countryside that Ethan had never explored before. When they finally turned through a gate with actual guards posted, Liam was half asleep against his shoulder. The property was enormous, a sprawling estate with a main house that looked like something from a movie, and several smaller guest houses scattered across manicured grounds. Marcus drove them to one of the guest houses, a 2-story cottage with warm lights glowing in the windows. "Isabella had it prepared for you," Marcus explained as he helped carry their bags inside. "Fully stocked kitchen, comfortable beds, and security coverage 24/7. You're safe here, Ethan." The interior was beautiful. Hardwood floors, comfortable furniture, a kitchen that was bigger than Ethan's entire apartment had been. Upstairs, there were 2 bedrooms, each with their own bathroom. Liam's room had already been set up with children's furniture, toys, and books, as if Isabella had been planning for this possibility. Maybe she had been. "Try to get some sleep," Marcus said. "Tomorrow we'll establish a routine and discuss the security protocols. But for tonight, just rest. You're both exhausted." After Marcus left, Ethan tucked Liam into the unfamiliar bed, pulling the covers up to his chin. "How are you doing, buddy?" "It's nice here," Liam said quietly. "But I miss our apartment, and Mrs. Chen, and my school. I know, me too, but this is just temporary, okay? Just until it's safe to go home." "When will that be?" "I don't know, but I promise, as soon as it's safe, we'll go back." "Dad?" Liam's voice was very small. "Are the bad guys coming after us because you helped that lady?" Ethan felt his heart break a little. "Yeah, buddy, I think they are." "Do you wish you hadn't helped her, so we could still be home?" The question hung in the air between them. Ethan thought about that night, about Isabella's screams, about the choice he'd made in a split second. Would he make a different choice if he could do it over, knowing what it would cost? "No," he said finally. "I don't wish that, because she needed help, and I was there to give it. That's who I am, Liam. That's who I taught you to be. We help people, even when it's hard, even when it costs us something." Liam nodded slowly, processing this. "Okay, then I'm glad you helped her too, even if we have to live here for a while." Ethan kissed his son's forehead, his eyes stinging with tears he wouldn't let fall. "You're the best kid in the whole world. You know that?" "I know," Liam said with a sleepy smile. "You tell me all the time." After Liam finally drifted off, Ethan stood at the window of the guest house, looking out at the dark grounds. Security lights dotted the perimeter. He could see the shadow of a guard patrolling in the distance. This was his life now, not just the job and the office and the new opportunities, but also the danger that came with it, the threats that followed courage, the price of doing the right thing. His phone buzzed, a text from Isabella. "Marcus told me what happened. I'm so sorry, Ethan. We'll fix this. I promise you'll both be safe." He typed back, "Thank you for everything. We'll be okay." Her response came quickly. You saved my life. The least I can do is protect yours. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to end this. Ethan set the phone down and looked at his reflection in the dark window. The man staring back at him looked tired, worried, but not broken, not defeated. He'd protected his son. He'd made the hard choices. He'd stepped into danger to save a stranger and changed both their lives in the process. And somehow, despite everything, he'd do it all again. Because that's what heroes did, even when the cost was higher than they'd ever imagined. Morning came too early, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and pulling Ethan from restless dreams filled with shadows and threats. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was. The room was too nice, the bed too comfortable, everything wrong. Then reality crashed back in and he sat up abruptly, his first thought for Liam. He found his son already awake, sitting at the kitchen table in his pajamas with a plate of pancakes in front of him. Isabella Ford sat across from him, also in casual clothes, jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger, more approachable than the executive he'd seen in her office. She was laughing at something Liam had said, her face open and genuine in a way that surprised Ethan. "Dad!" Liam's face lit up when he spotted Ethan in the doorway. "Miss Ford made pancakes, and they have blueberries." "I hope you don't mind me letting myself in," Isabella said, standing. "Marcus told me you both had a rough night, and I thought maybe a friendly face and breakfast might help. There's coffee on the counter and more pancakes if you're hungry." Ethan moved into the kitchen on autopilot, still processing the surreal image of one of the wealthiest women in the country making breakfast in his temporary kitchen. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." She poured him a cup of coffee, adding cream the way he took it. She'd clearly paid attention during their office meetings. "Liam and I have been having a lovely conversation about space and planets. Did you know he wants to be an astronaut?" "This week," Ethan said with a small smile, accepting the coffee. "Last week he wanted to be a veterinarian. The week before that, a professional soccer player." "I wanted to be everything when I was his age too," Isabella said. "It's good to have dreams." She looked at Liam with genuine warmth. "And I think you'd make an excellent astronaut." Liam beamed, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. This woman, this CEO who commanded boardrooms and controlled billion-dollar assets, was sitting in a guesthouse kitchen making his son feel special. Not because she had to, not for publicity or optics, but because she genuinely cared. After Liam finished eating and ran upstairs to get dressed, Isabella's expression turned more serious. "We need to talk about what happens next." "I know. Marcus said you'd have a plan." "Several plans, actually, but I want to hear what you need first. This is your life, Ethan, your son's life. You get a say in how we handle it." They sat at the table, coffee cups between them, and Ethan appreciated that she waited for him to speak first instead of steamrolling him with decisions already made. "I need Liam to feel as normal as possible," Ethan said finally. "He's scared, even if he's trying to be brave about it. He doesn't understand why bad people are after us, and honestly, I'm not sure I do either. We were just starting to build something stable, and now everything's chaos again." "The police have leads," Isabella said carefully. "The men who tried to take me that night, they weren't random criminals. They were hired by someone, and that someone apparently doesn't like loose ends. You're a witness. You can identify them. That makes you dangerous to whoever orchestrated this." "So what do? Hide here forever?" "No, we find them first." Her eyes hardened with determination. "I've hired a private investigation firm to work alongside the police. The best in the country. They're tracking down every lead, following every thread. Marcus's team is analyzing the threat you received, trying to trace it back to its source. And I've put up a substantial reward for information leading to arrests. Someone will talk. Someone always does when enough money is involved. And in the meantime? In the meantime, you and Liam stay here where it's safe. I've arranged for a tutor to work with Liam so he doesn't fall behind in school. Mrs. Chen can visit whenever she wants. Marcus will provide transportation and security. And you'll continue working on the foundation, just remotely for now. We'll set up video conferences, digital document reviews, whatever you need." Ethan stared into his coffee, watching the cream swirl in dark eddies. "I feel like I'm in witness protection or something." "That's essentially what this is. Protection. But not forever." just until the threat is eliminated. Isabella reached across the table and touched his hand gently. I know this isn't fair. I know you didn't sign up for any of this when you ran to help me that night. But I promise you, Ethan, I will not rest until you and Liam can go home safely. You saved my life. The least I can do is give you yours back. The weight of her sincerity was almost overwhelming. Ethan had spent most of his adult life being disappointed by people, by Sarah walking away, by employers who treated him as expendable, by a system that seemed designed to keep people like him struggling. But Isabella Ford, who had every reason to just throw money at the problem and walk away, was instead treating his safety and his son's well-being as a personal responsibility. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything, the job, the protection, the pancakes, all of it. She squeezed his hand once before pulling back. Thank you for being the kind of person who runs toward danger instead of away from it. The world needs more people like you. She stood, smoothing her sweater. I need to get to the office, but I'll be back this evening. Marcus is coordinating a full security briefing at 2 o'clock, and I want to be here for it. In the meantime, try to relax. Explore the grounds with Liam. There's a pond out back with ducks, and the gardens are beautiful this time of year. Let him be a kid for a while. After she left, Ethan sat alone in the kitchen for a long moment, trying to reconcile his old life with his new reality. 2 weeks ago, his biggest worry had been making rent. Now he was living in a guest house on a private estate, working a 6-figure job, and hiding from hired criminals who wanted him dead. Dad? Liam appeared at the bottom of the stairs, now dressed in jeans and his favorite superhero t-shirt. Can we go see the ducks Ms. Ford told me about? Ethan looked at his son, 7 years old and still innocent enough to be excited about ducks despite everything happening around them. That innocence was worth protecting, worth fighting for. Yeah, buddy, let's go see the ducks. The grounds were even more impressive in daylight. Manicured lawns stretched in every direction, interrupted by flower gardens and stone pathways and clusters of trees that provided shade and privacy. The pond Isabella had mentioned sat at the far end of the property, surrounded by cattails, and visited by a family of mallards who quacked indignantly when Ethan and Liam approached. They spent an hour there, Liam throwing bits of bread to the ducks, while Ethan sat on a bench and watched. Security was subtle but present. Ethan spotted at least 2 guards patrolling in the distance. Their presence meant a comfort rather than alarm. The morning air was crisp and clean, so different from the city smog he'd grown accustomed to. His phone buzzed with messages from the office. Patricia checking in to make sure he was okay. Jennifer Martinez from Community Relations sending him notes on an upcoming site visit that would now have to be handled by video conference. Richard Chen forwarding budget reports that needed his review. Life continued, even in exile. Around noon, a car arrived at the main gate, Mrs. Chen escorted by one of Marcus's team. She came bearing Tupperware containers filled with Liam's favorite foods and enough worry to fuel a small army. Look at this place, she said, standing in the guest house living room and turning in a slow circle. It's like a palace. But I don't care how fancy it is. Are you both eating properly? Sleeping? That boy looks too thin. Mrs. Chen, we've been here less than 24 hours. 24 hours is enough time to forget to eat. Sit down, both of you. I brought lunch. They ate her homemade dumplings and listened to her news from the building, who was complaining about which neighbor had gotten a new dog, the latest gossip from the lobby. It was mundane and ordinary and exactly what Ethan needed. A reminder that the normal world still existed, still turned, still had space for him when this nightmare ended. After lunch, while Liam helped Mrs. Chen wash dishes, Ethan stepped outside to take a call from Detective Martinez. Mr. Cole, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We've identified one of the men from the night of the attempted kidnapping. His name is Viktor Sokolov, former military, currently wanted in connection with several other crimes. We're working with federal authorities to track him down. And the threat I received? We're analyzing it. The phone was a burner, but we're looking at cell tower data to see if we can narrow down where it was purchased and activated. These things take time, but we're making progress. Do you think my son is really in danger, or was it just meant to scare me? There was a pause. I think you should take it seriously, which you are. Ms. Ford's security arrangements are more than adequate. Stay where you are, follow the protocols, and let us do our job. We will find these people, Mr. Cole. I promise you that. After the call ended, Ethan stood in the garden, staring at nothing, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on his shoulders. He'd wanted a better life for Liam. He'd wanted security and stability, and the kind of future where his son didn't have to worry about whether they could afford groceries. He'd gotten all of that, but the cost had been higher than he'd ever imagined. The security briefing at 2 o'clock was thorough and sobering. Marcus gathered Ethan, Isabella, and 2 other members of his team in the main house's library, a room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furniture that smelled of old paper and wood polish. We've identified 3 individuals connected to the attempted kidnapping, Marcus began, pulling up photos on a tablet. Victor Sokolov, who Detective Martinez mentioned. Chen Wei, a known associate with ties to organized crime, and a 3rd man we're still working to identify. All of them are professionals. This wasn't some opportunistic grab. It was planned, coordinated, and funded by someone with significant resources. Who? Isabella asked. Who wanted me badly enough to hire professionals? We have 3 working theories. First, Gregory Hartman, the CEO of Titan Industries. You beat him out for the Riverside development contract 6 months ago, and he's made threats before. Gregory is all bluster, Isabella said dismissively. He wouldn't actually kidnap someone. Maybe not personally, but he has connections to people who would. Theory 2. The Kozlov Organization. They've been trying to expand their operations into legitimate business, and you've actively blocked several of their shell companies from securing contracts and partnerships. Isabella's face went pale. The Russian mob? You think the Russian mob tried to kidnap me? It's a possibility we can't ignore. And third, David Chen, your former business partner. He's been bitter since you bought out his shares 5 years ago, and he's in serious financial trouble. Desperate people do desperate things. Ethan listened to all of this with growing horror. This wasn't just some random crime. It was tangled up in corporate warfare, organized crime, and personal vendettas, and he'd stepped right into the middle of it. What's the plan? Isabella asked, her voice steady despite the fear Ethan could see in her eyes. We're investigating all 3 angles. The FBI is involved now, which gives us more resources. In the meantime, you need to increase your security profile. No public appearances without full protective detail. Vary your routes and schedules. And, Marcus glanced at Ethan, Mr. Cole and his son stay here until we've neutralized the threat. No exceptions. I wasn't planning on going anywhere, Ethan said, but I need to know, are we talking days, weeks, months? I can't give you a timeline, but I can promise we're working around the clock to end this as quickly as possible. After the briefing, Isabella walked Ethan back to the guest house. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, and somewhere in the distance, Ethan could hear Liam laughing as he played with Mrs. Chen. I'm sorry, Isabella said quietly. This is my world, my enemies, and you're caught in the crossfire. I made the choice to help you. Nobody forced me. But you didn't choose this. The threats, the hiding, your son being in danger, none of that is fair. Life isn't fair, Ethan said with a tired smile. I learned that a long time ago. You just deal with what comes and try to protect the people you love. They walked in silence for a moment before Isabella spoke again. Can I tell you something? That night, when those men grabbed me, I was so terrified I couldn't think straight. But then you appeared, and for the first time in my life, someone protected me. Not because I paid them to, not because it was their job, but because you saw someone in trouble and acted. Do you know how rare that is? How extraordinary. I'm not extraordinary. I'm just a guy who risks everything for strangers, who works himself to exhaustion for his son, who steps up when everyone else steps back. She stopped walking and turned to face him. You are extraordinary, Ethan Cole. You just don't see it yet. The intensity in her gaze made Ethan uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being seen this way, valued this way. His entire life, he'd been invisible. Another blue-collar worker in a city full of them. Another single parent struggling to get by. Another person the world overlooked. I should get back to Liam, he said, breaking eye contact. Make sure Mrs. Chen isn't spoiling him too much. Isabella smiled, understanding the deflection for what it was. Of course. I'll see you tomorrow. I'm working from home for the next few days, so if you need anything, just call. That evening, after Mrs. Chen had left and Liam was in bed, Ethan sat on the guest house porch with a beer he'd found in the well-stocked refrigerator. The night was quiet except for crickets and the distant sound of water from the pond. Security lights glowed at intervals, creating pools of illumination in the darkness. His phone rang, an unknown number. Ethan's hand tightened around the beer bottle as he answered. "Hello? Mr. Cole?" The voice was male, accented, Russian, maybe, and cold as winter ice. "You should have stayed out of this. Now your son pays the price." Ethan's blood turned to ice. "If you touch my son, you'll what? You're nothing, a nobody who got lucky once, but luck runs out." There was a pause, then, "The woman isn't worth dying for. Walk away. Forget what you saw. Or we'll make sure you have nothing left to protect." The line went dead. Ethan sat frozen for a moment, then jumped up and sprinted inside, taking the stairs 2 at a time to Liam's room. His son was right where he'd left him, fast asleep, safe, undisturbed. Ethan stood in the doorway, his heart hammering, watching Liam's chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. Then he pulled out his phone and called Marcus. "They called me. Directly. On my personal phone." Marcus was at the guest house in under 3 minutes, moving with the efficiency of a man who'd prepared for this contingency. He had Ethan's phone in an evidence bag within seconds, already calling his technical team to trace the call. "How did they get your number?" Marcus asked. "I don't know. I'm careful. I don't give it out to people I don't know." "Someone gave it to them, or they hacked your phone. Either way, this escalates things." Marcus was already texting rapidly on his own phone. "We're moving you to a safe house. Tonight, different location, higher security, completely off-grid. But Liam will be safer there than here. If they found your phone number, they might know where you are. We can't take chances." Within an hour, they were on the move again. Ethan woke Liam as gently as he could, carrying his sleepy son to another black SUV, this one with even more security features. They drove for what felt like forever, taking circuitous routes through the dark countryside, doubling back, making sure they weren't followed. The new safe house was smaller, more austere, a reinforced structure that looked like a regular home from the outside, but had security measures that belonged in a military facility. Bulletproof windows, reinforced doors, a panic room, cameras covering every angle. "I don't like this," Liam whispered as Ethan carried him inside. "It's scary." "I know, buddy, but it's just for a little while, and I'm right here. I won't let anything happen to you." Isabella arrived an hour later, her face tight with worry and anger. She found Ethan in the safe house kitchen, unable to sleep, staring at nothing. "This is unacceptable," she said without preamble. "They threatened a child. They crossed every line. They want me to walk away, to forget what I saw. And I'm thinking about it." Ethan's voice was hollow. "Not for me, but for Liam. He didn't ask for any of this. He shouldn't have to be scared, shouldn't have to hide, shouldn't have to pay for my choices." Isabella pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "If you walk away, what message does that send your son? That we surrender to evil because it's easier? That we let bad people win because standing up is too hard? He's 7 years old. He shouldn't have to learn those lessons yet." "No, he shouldn't. But he's learning them anyway because the world isn't fair and bad people exist. The question is, what does he learn from watching you?" Isabella leaned forward, her voice intense. "Does he learn that his father gives up when things get hard? Or does he learn that sometimes protecting people costs something, but we do it anyway because it's right?" Ethan closed his eyes, exhausted beyond measure. "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. You tackled armed men to save a stranger. You took a knife wound protecting someone you'd never met. You're exactly strong enough." She reached across the table and took his hand. "And you're not alone. I'm here. Marcus is here. An entire team of people is working to end this. Let us help you. Let us be strong when you can't be." The vulnerability in her voice surprised him. This wasn't CEO Isabella Ford speaking. This was just Isabella, a woman who'd been terrified and helpless until someone decided she was worth saving. "Okay," Ethan said finally. "We don't walk away, we see this through. Together." together. The next few days blurred into a strange routine. Ethan worked remotely from the safe house, attending video conferences and reviewing documents while Marcus's team maintained constant vigilance. A tutor named Sarah arrived each morning to work with Liam, a kind woman in her 50s who treated the abnormal situation as perfectly ordinary. Mrs. Chen visited every other day, always bringing food and comfort and the steady presence Ethan had come to depend on. Isabella came by each evening, usually with dinner from some restaurant or another, always making time to talk with Liam about his day before settling in with Ethan to discuss the foundation's work. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the boundaries between employer and employee began to blur. They were two people thrown together by circumstance, finding common ground in their shared commitment to making something good come from something terrible. On the fourth night in the safe house, after Liam was asleep and they'd finished reviewing grant applications, Isabella poured them each a glass of wine and sat on the couch with a heavy sigh. "The FBI has a lead on Chen Wei," she said. "They think he's hiding in Canada. If they can grab him, he might flip on whoever hired them. That's good news. It's progress." She took a sip of wine, then looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Sure." "When you ran to help me that night, what were you thinking? In that split second when you had to decide, what went through your mind?" Ethan thought back to that moment, to the rain and the screams, and the impossible choice that hadn't felt like a choice at all. "I thought about Liam, about what kind of man I wanted to be for him. And I thought, if that was him being dragged into that car, I'd want someone to help. So I did." "Just like that?" "Just like that. There wasn't time for a cost-benefit analysis or weighing the risks. Someone needed help, and I could provide it. Everything else was just noise." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, staring into her wine glass. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "I've spent my whole life in a world where every decision is calculated. Every move is strategic. Every relationship has an angle. And then you appear, someone who acts on pure instinct to help others, who doesn't want anything in return, who sees a person instead of a business opportunity." She looked up at him. "You've reminded me what genuine goodness looks like, and I don't think I'll ever be able to thank you enough for that. You're thanking me plenty. The job, the protection, keeping Liam safe. That's not thanks. That's just me trying to be the kind of person who deserves to be saved by someone like you." The intensity in her eyes made Ethan's breath catch. There was something happening here, something beyond gratitude or professional respect, something that scared him almost as much as the threats from armed criminals. "I should check on Liam," he said, standing abruptly. "Make sure he's still sleeping okay." Isabella nodded, understanding the retreat for what it was. "Of course. I'll let myself out. See you tomorrow, Ethan." After she left, Ethan stood in Liam's doorway for a long time, watching his son sleep. His life had become so complicated, so entangled with Isabella Ford's world. He'd gone from barely making rent to having a six-figure job, from anonymity to being called a hero, from working himself to death to having people protect him. And somewhere along the way, he'd started to care about Isabella as more than just his employer or the person he'd saved. He saw her vulnerability, her genuine desire to do good, her loneliness in a world of wealth and power where everyone wanted something from her. She was right. They'd reminded each other what goodness looked like. And maybe, just maybe, they'd both needed that reminder more than either of them had realized. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. "Chen Wei in custody. Montreal PD picked him up 2 hours ago. FBI is bringing him back for questioning. This could be the break we need." Ethan stared at the message, hope flickering in his chest for the first time in days. Maybe this nightmare was finally approaching its end. Maybe he and Liam could go home. Maybe life could return to something resembling normal. But even as he thought it, Ethan knew that normal had changed forever. He wasn't the same person who'd worked 2 jobs and struggled to make ends meet. He'd stepped into a different world, saved someone who mattered, and discovered that he mattered too. There was no going back to who he'd been before that rainy night. And increasingly, Ethan realized he didn't want to. The next morning brought news that Chen Wei was cooperating with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd named names, revealed connections, and most importantly, identified who had hired them to kidnap Isabella Ford. It was David Chen, her former business partner, The man she'd once trusted, who'd helped build her company in its early years, who'd walked away bitter and resentful when she'd bought him out. He'd lost everything in bad investments and had decided that if he couldn't have success, neither should she. The kidnapping had been about ransom partly, but more about revenge. About destroying the woman who'd succeeded while he'd failed. By noon, David Chen was in custody. By evening, the FBI had rolled up the entire operation, Viktor Sokolov caught trying to flee to Mexico, 3 other associates arrested in coordinated raids across 2 states. It was over. Marcus delivered the news personally, standing in the safe house living room with something approaching a smile on his usually stern face. "You're safe. Both of you. We've got them all, and they're not getting out anytime soon." Ethan felt his knees go weak with relief. "We can go home?" "You can go home, though I'd recommend keeping some security measures in place for a while, just to be safe." Liam, who'd been doing homework at the kitchen table, looked up with wide eyes. "We can go back to our apartment and my school and see Mrs. Chen whenever we want?" "Yeah, buddy, we can go home." His son's whoop of joy was the most beautiful sound Ethan had ever heard. Isabella arrived an hour later, and when she walked through the door, Ethan saw tears on her face, the first time he'd seen her cry. She pulled him into a hug that surprised them both, holding on tightly for a long moment. "It's over," she whispered. "Thank God it's over." "We're okay," Ethan said, his arms around her, feeling her shake with relief. "Everyone's okay." When they finally pulled apart, she wiped at her eyes, laughing a little at herself. "I'm sorry, I don't usually... It's been a very emotional few weeks." "You don't have to apologize for being human." She smiled at that, and something passed between them, an understanding that they'd been through something extraordinary together, something that had changed them both in ways they were only beginning to understand. That evening, they had dinner together at the safe house one last time. Ethan, Liam, Isabella, and Mrs. Chen, who'd come bearing enough food to feed an army. It felt like a celebration and a farewell and the beginning of something new all at once. Liam chattered excitedly about going back to school and seeing his friends and sleeping in his own bed again. Mrs. Chen fussed over everyone, making sure plates were full and glasses were filled. Isabella sat back and watched it all with a soft smile, looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her. "Thank you," she said quietly, leaning close to Ethan while Liam was distracted telling Mrs. Chen about the ducks he'd fed. "For everything. For saving my life. For not walking away when things got dangerous. For reminding me what matters. Thank you for giving us a better life. For seeing something in me I didn't see in myself. I saw what was there all along, Ethan. You just needed someone to point it out." Later, after everyone had gone home and Liam was asleep, Ethan packed their belongings for the return to their apartment. Tomorrow they'd go back to the city, back to their old building, back to a life that would be familiar but forever changed. He'd have his job at the foundation. He'd have financial security. He'd have the knowledge that he'd faced genuine danger and protected his son through it all. But more than that, he'd have proof that doing the right thing, even when it cost you everything, was worth it. That stepping up mattered. That one person could make a difference. His phone buzzed. A text from Isabella. "I know you're going home tomorrow, but I hope you'll still come by the office. The foundation needs you. I need you. You've become more than an employee, Ethan. You've become a friend." He smiled as he typed his response. "I'll be there Monday morning, ready to work. And thank you for being the kind of person worth saving." Her reply came quickly. "We saved each other. That's what friends do." Ethan set the phone down and looked around the safe house that had been their refuge. Tomorrow they'd leave this place behind. But the lessons learned here, the connections forged, the ways they'd all grown, those would stay with them forever. He'd run toward danger to save a stranger, and in doing so, he'd saved himself. Sometimes courage costs everything, but sometimes it gives back even more. 3 months had passed since that night in the rain, and the city had returned to its normal rhythm of traffic and commerce and lives intersecting in countless invisible ways. Winter had settled in with its cold clarity, frost-coating windows in the early mornings, and breath-forming clouds in the air. Ethan stood at his office window on the 37th floor, watching the sun rise over buildings he'd once only seen from street level, and marveled at how much had changed. The foundation was thriving. In just 3 months, They'd funded 18 community safety programs across the city, trained over 200 neighborhood watch volunteers, and partnered with 6 police precincts to improve community relations. The work was exhausting and challenging and more fulfilling than anything Ethan had ever done. Every day brought new problems to solve, new people to help, new ways to make a tangible difference in the lives of others. He'd learned to navigate the corporate world with Patricia's patient guidance, mastered budget spreadsheets and grant proposals, grown comfortable speaking at community forums and board meetings. The imposter syndrome still crept in sometimes, usually late at night when he was alone with his thoughts. But it was quieter now, easier to silence with evidence of the good work they were accomplishing. Liam had returned to his regular school, though now he was picked up each afternoon by a driver in the company's sedan, a compromise between security and normalcy that Ethan had finally accepted. His son had adjusted remarkably well to everything, with the resilience children possessed when they felt loved and safe. The nightmares had faded. The fear had diminished. Life had found its new equilibrium. "Morning," Isabella's voice came from behind him, and Ethan turned to find her standing in his doorway with 2 cups of coffee. She'd taken to stopping by his office first thing in the morning, a ritual that had become as natural as breathing. "Thought you could use this. You're a lifesaver." He accepted the cup, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. Such small moments of contact had become more frequent over the past months. A hand on an arm during conversation, shoulders touching as they reviewed documents together, lingering hugs when one of them had particularly good or bad news to share. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that crossed professional lines, but something that hummed with possibility nonetheless. "Big day today," Isabella said, settling into the chair across from his desk. She'd abandoned her formal business attire in his office, often showing up in more casual clothes that made her seem less like a CEO and more like just Isabella. Today she wore slacks and a soft blue sweater that brought out the warmth in her dark eyes. "The mayor's announcement at noon, and then the gala tonight." "Don't remind me about the gala. I still can't believe you talked me into giving a speech." "The foundation's biggest fundraiser of the year, the man who literally saved my life and inspired the whole initiative? Of course you're giving a speech." She smiled over the rim of her coffee cup. "Besides, you're good at it now. That community forum last week was incredible. You had people crying and laughing and opening their wallets. That's different. Those were neighbors talking to neighbors. Tonight it's going to be your world. People in $1,000 suits who see me as a curiosity, the security guard who got lucky. First of all, you didn't get lucky. You were brave. Second, those people need to hear from someone real, someone who actually understands what we're trying to accomplish." Isabella set down her coffee and leaned forward, her expression serious. "And third, you're not just a security guard anymore, Ethan. You're the director of a foundation that's changing lives. You've earned your place at that podium, whether you believe it or not." Before Ethan could respond, Patricia appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but the mayor's office just called. They want you both there 30 minutes early for a pre-announcement briefing." "Both of us?" Ethan asked. "Both of you," Patricia confirmed. "Apparently the mayor has plans that involve the foundation, and he wants to discuss them before going public." The mayor's office was in City Hall, a historic building downtown that Ethan had passed countless times but never entered. Now he walked through its marble halls beside Isabella, their footsteps echoing off high ceilings, security personnel nodding respectfully as they passed. The mayor's chief of staff met them outside the main office, an efficient woman in her 40s who got straight to business. "The mayor wants to announce a partnership with your foundation," she explained as she led them inside. "A substantial city contract to implement your community safety model across all 5 boroughs. It's a 3-year commitment worth $20 million. Ethan felt his breath catch. $20 million. That kind of money could transform everything, expand their programs, hire more staff, reach communities they'd only dreamed of helping. Mayor Richardson was a tall black man in his 50s with an easy smile and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He stood when they entered, coming around his desk to shake their hands warmly. "Ms. Ford, Mr. Cole, thank you for coming on short notice." "Mr. Mayor," Isabella said smoothly, "we're intrigued by what we're hearing about this partnership." "It's simple, really. What you've accomplished in 3 months is remarkable. Crime is down in every neighborhood where you've implemented programs. Community trust in law enforcement is up. People feel safer, more empowered to protect their own communities. That's exactly what this city needs. He gestured for them to sit, then continued. But here's the thing. I need both of you standing beside me when I make this announcement. Ms. Ford, you represent the business community's commitment to social good. And Mr. Cole, the mayor's eyes found Ethan's. You represent something even more important. You're proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, that courage and character matter more than credentials or wealth. That's a message this city desperately needs to hear. I'm not sure I'm the right person to... Ethan started. You're exactly the right person, the mayor interrupted gently. I've read about what you did that night. I've watched interviews with people whose communities have been transformed by your programs. I've seen the grant applications you've approved, how you prioritize need over politics, substance over flash. You're the real deal, Mr. Cole. And I want the city to see that. An hour later, Ethan stood on the steps of City Hall with Isabella on one side and the mayor on the other, facing a crowd of reporters and cameras. The announcement went smoothly. The mayor spoke about public safety and community partnerships. Isabella discussed the foundation's vision and goals, and then it was Ethan's turn. He'd prepared remarks, had practiced them with Patricia, but standing there in the winter sunshine with the entire city watching, the prepared words felt hollow. So he spoke from his heart instead. 3 months ago, I was working 2 jobs just to keep my son fed and clothed. I was invisible, just another person the world looked past without seeing. Then one night, I saw someone in trouble, and I did the only thing that felt right. I helped. He paused, looking out at the crowd. That decision changed my life, but more importantly, it reminded me that we all have the power to help, to step up, to make our communities safer and better. That's what this foundation is about. Not just funding programs, but empowering people to be the kind of neighbors who look out for each other, who don't wait for someone else to fix problems, who run toward trouble instead of away from it. The applause was genuine and warm, and as Ethan stepped back from the microphone, Isabella caught his hand and squeezed it briefly, a gesture of pride and support that made his chest tighten with emotion. Afterwards, surrounded by reporters shouting questions, Ethan felt Isabella's hand on his elbow, guiding him toward the waiting car. They settled into the back seat, and as the driver pulled away from City Hall, she turned to him with a radiant smile. You were perfect, absolutely perfect. I threw away the prepared remarks. I know, that's why it was perfect. She was still smiling, her eyes bright with an emotion Ethan couldn't quite name. You spoke the truth. You made people feel something. That's worth more than any polished speech. Back at the office, the afternoon passed in a blur of congratulatory emails and phone calls. Community leaders thanking them for the mayor's support. Board members excited about the expanded funding. Jennifer Martinez from Community Relations already strategizing about which neighborhoods to target first with the new resources. At 5 o'clock, Patricia appeared at Ethan's door with a garment bag. Your tuxedo for tonight. The car will pick you and Liam up at 7. Liam? Ethan looked up from his computer. I thought he was staying with Mrs. Chen. Ms. Ford insisted he come to the gala. She said, and I quote, Liam should see his father being celebrated for the hero he is. Patricia's expression softened. Between you and me, I think she's right. Let him see you in this world. Let him understand what you've built. The gala was being held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, the same place where everything had started. Ethan hadn't been back since that rainy night, and as the car pulled up to the entrance, he felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The white canopy, the valet station, the golden light spilling from the lobby, all of it achingly familiar but transformed by context and time. Dad, this place is fancy, Liam breathed, his eyes wide as he took in the opulence. He wore a little suit that Isabella had sent over, looking impossibly grown up and still heartbreakingly young. Are we really going inside? We are, buddy, and you're going to be on your best behavior, right? Right. No running, no yelling, use my inside voice and my best manners. Liam recited the rules they'd practiced, then looked up at Ethan with worried eyes. What if I mess up? What if I embarrass you? Ethan crouched down to his son's level, adjusting Liam's little bow tie. You could never embarrass me, Liam. You're the reason I do any of this. Every single good thing in my life exists because I'm your dad, and I want to make you proud. So just be yourself, have fun, and remember that I love you no matter what. Even if I spill something on my fancy suit? Even then. The ballroom was magnificent, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across tables draped in white linen, a string quartet playing softly in one corner, waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres that probably cost more per bite than Ethan used to spend on entire meals. The city's elite had turned out in force. Business leaders and philanthropists, politicians and celebrities, all dressed in designer gowns and tuxedos that cost more than Ethan's old truck. He felt out of place for about 30 seconds until Isabella found them. She wore a stunning emerald dress that flowed like water when she moved. Her hair swept up to reveal her elegant neck, diamonds at her ears and throat catching the light. She looked like she belonged in a magazine spread, utterly sophisticated and beautiful. But when she saw them, her formal smile transformed into something genuine and warm. "Ethan, Liam, you both look so handsome." She crouched down, designer dress and all, to Liam's level. "I'm so glad you could come tonight, Liam. Your dad is being honored, and I wanted you to see it." "Miss Ford, your dress is really pretty," Liam said shyly, "like a princess." "Thank you, sweetheart. That's the nicest compliment I've received all evening." She straightened, her eyes meeting Ethan's, and something passed between them, a spark of connection that had been building for months. "Come on, I'll introduce you to some people who are very excited to meet you." The next hour was a whirlwind of introductions and conversations. Ethan met donors who'd contributed to the foundation, community leaders whose programs they'd funded, city council members who wanted to discuss expanding their initiatives. Everyone wanted to shake his hand, to thank him for his courage, to tell him how inspiring his story was. Through it all, Liam stayed close to his side, occasionally tugging on Ethan's sleeve to whisper questions or observations. Mrs. Chen appeared at some point. Isabella had arranged for her to attend, and took charge of Liam, giving Ethan space to navigate the social demands while ensuring his son was entertained and fed. Dinner was a formal affair with multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Ethan sat at the head table between Isabella and the mayor, feeling increasingly surreal about his life. A year ago, he'd been eating ramen noodles for dinner and wondering how to afford Liam's school supplies. Now he was dining on filet mignon and discussing urban policy with the mayor while wearing a tuxedo. "You're doing it again," Isabella murmured between courses. "Doing what?" "That thing where you look like you're about to bolt. You get this expression like you're convinced someone's going to realize you don't belong here and throw you out." "Maybe because that's exactly what I'm thinking." She turned to face him fully, her voice low and intense. "Ethan Cole, you saved my life. You've built a foundation that's changing this city. You're raising an incredible son while managing a demanding job and learning an entirely new world. You belong here. You've earned every single bit of this." Before he could respond, the mayor stood to begin the evening's program. There were several speeches, donors being thanked, programs being highlighted, statistics shared about the foundation's impact. Then the mayor introduced Isabella, who took the podium with the confidence of someone who'd given 1,000 speeches. "3 months ago, I experienced something that changed my life forever," she began. "I was attacked outside this very hotel by men who wanted to take everything from me. My freedom, possibly my life. I was terrified and helpless. And in that moment, I understood how vulnerable we all are, how much we depend on the goodness of others." She paused, her eyes finding Ethan's across the room. And then a stranger appeared, a man who had every reason to look the other way, to decide it wasn't his problem, to prioritize his own safety over mine. But he didn't. Ethan Cole ran toward danger without hesitation. He fought armed men. He got hurt protecting someone he'd never met. And he did it all because it was the right thing to do. The room was silent, everyone focused on her words. Isabella's voice grew stronger, more passionate. That night, Ethan reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that real power isn't measured in wealth or status or control. It's measured in courage, in integrity, in the willingness to sacrifice for others. And I realized that if I wanted to honor what he'd done, I needed to build something that embodied those same values. She gestured toward the screens behind her, which began showing images of the foundation's work. Neighborhood watch volunteers in training, community centers being renovated, kids participating in safety programs, neighbors looking out for each other. The Ford Public Safety Foundation exists because one man showed us what true heroism looks like. And now, through the programs we've built and the communities we've empowered, we're trying to create a world where more people can be like him, where courage and compassion are valued above all else. Isabella looked directly at Ethan, and her voice softened. Tonight, we're honoring the man who saved my life. But more than that, we're celebrating what he represents, the truth that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That character matters more than credentials. That one person, in one moment, can change everything. She stepped away from the podium and gestured toward him. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Ethan Cole, hero, friend, and the director of a foundation that's proving every single day that goodness still exists in this world. The applause was thunderous. People rose to their feet, a standing ovation that rolled through the ballroom like a wave. Ethan stood on shaking legs, his face burning, his eyes stinging with tears he refused to let fall. He made his way to the podium, passing Isabella, who squeezed his hand and whispered, "You've got this." Standing before hundreds of people, with cameras flashing and all eyes on him, Ethan felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what his actions had set in motion, the ripple effects of one decision made in the rain. "I'm not good at fancy speeches," he began, and there was some warm laughter. "I'm better at showing up and doing the work. But tonight, I want to say something important. 3 months ago, I made a choice in about 3 seconds. I saw someone in trouble and I helped. That's it. There was no master plan, no expectation of reward, just instinct and a belief that when someone's in danger, you don't look away." He paused, gathering his thoughts. But what happened after? That's the real story. Ms. Ford didn't just thank me and move on. She saw potential in someone the world had overlooked. She gave me an opportunity I never could have imagined, and then she gave me the resources and support to actually make a difference. She turned one moment of courage into something that's helping thousands of people. Ethan looked out at the crowd, seeing faces he'd come to know over the past months, community leaders and donors, volunteers and partners, all of them part of this growing movement to make the city safer and stronger. This foundation isn't about me being a hero. It's about recognizing that every community has people like me, people who care, who want to help, who just need resources and support to make it happen. We're not creating heroes. We're empowering the heroes who already exist in every neighborhood, on every block. We're just giving them the tools to act on their courage. His eyes found Liam sitting with Mrs. Chen near the front, looking up at his father with an expression of pure pride and love. "My son is here tonight. I brought him because I want him to see that doing the right thing matters, that helping people, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something, is always worth it. That's the legacy I want to leave him. Not money or status, but the knowledge that one person can make a difference." Ethan's voice grew stronger, more confident. "So to everyone here tonight, whether you donated money or volunteered time or just showed up because you believe in what we're doing, thank you. You're part of something bigger than any one person. You're part of a movement to reclaim our communities, to prove that goodness and courage still matter. And together, we're going to keep building on that. One neighborhood at a time, one life at a time, one moment of courage at a time." The applause this time was even louder, and Ethan stepped back from the podium feeling lighter somehow. Like he'd finally accepted the weight of what he'd become, what he represented. He wasn't just Ethan Cole, the security guard, anymore. He was Ethan Cole who'd made a difference, who'd transformed one act of courage into a legacy of change. As he returned to his seat, Isabella stood and pulled him into a hug that lasted a beat longer than professional, her arms tight around him. "Thank you," she whispered against his ear, "for everything, for saving me, for building this with me, for being exactly who you are." When they pulled apart, there were tears on her face, reflecting the chandelier light like diamonds. Ethan reached up without thinking and gently wiped them away with his thumb. "We saved each other," he said softly. "That's what friends do." Something shifted in her expression, a decision being made in real time. Is that what we are? Just friends? The question hung between them, loaded with months of growing connection, of boundaries carefully maintained, of feelings neither had been quite brave enough to acknowledge. Around them, the gala continued, music and conversation and celebration, but in that moment, it was just the two of them. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "I've been trying to figure that out for weeks. You're my employer. You're someone I respect enormously. You're from a completely different world than me, and yet I think about you constantly. I look forward to our morning coffee conversations more than anything else in my day. I care about your opinions and your feelings and your happiness in ways that go beyond professional respect." He took a breath. "But I also have Liam to think about, and a job that matters too much to risk, and the very real concern that I'm misreading everything and about to make a complete fool of myself." Isabella's smile was tremulous, but genuine. "You're not misreading anything. I've been feeling the same way. Fighting it because it seemed impossible, inappropriate, too complicated. You work for me. You saved my life, which creates this power dynamic I didn't want to exploit. And like you said, we're from different worlds." "But," Ethan prompted, hope and fear warring in his chest. "But maybe those are just excuses. Maybe the real question is whether we're brave enough to try, whether the connection we've built is worth the risk of complications." She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You ran toward danger to save my life, Ethan. You faced armed men and threats and turned your whole world upside down because it was right. So let me ask you, are you brave enough for this? For us?" Before Ethan could answer, Liam appeared at his side, tugging on his sleeve. "Dad, Mrs. Chen says there's cake. Can I have some?" The moment shattered, but the question remained, hanging in the air between them. Isabella smiled down at Liam, then back at Ethan. "We'll talk later. Go enjoy cake with your son." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and celebrations. Ethan introduced Liam to donors and community leaders, watched his son's eyes go wide at the dessert table, sat through more speeches and presentations. But through it all, he was aware of Isabella across the room, her laughter when talking to the mayor, her grace when greeting donors, the way her eyes found his repeatedly throughout the night. Finally, as the event was winding down and most guests had departed, Marcus approached with a discreet message. "Ms. Ford would like to speak with you privately. The library on the second floor, if you're available." Ethan found Mrs. Chen settling a sleepy Liam into one of the plush lobby chairs. "Can you watch him for a few more minutes?" "Of course, dear. Take your time." The library was a quiet sanctuary away from the main ballroom, all dark wood and leather-bound books and soft lighting. Isabella stood by the window, still in her emerald dress, looking out at the city lights. She turned when she heard him enter. "I've been thinking about what you said," Ethan began. "About being brave enough to try. And I'm terrified. Not of armed criminals or professional complications or any of the practical concerns. I'm terrified because I care about you, because you matter. Because if this doesn't work, I lose not just an employer or a friend, but someone who's become central to my life." Isabella crossed the room to stand in front of him. "I'm terrified too. I've spent my whole life building walls, protecting myself from people who wanted something from me. But you never wanted anything except to help. You saw me as a person, not a business opportunity or a stepping stone. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? So what do? We be honest. We take it slow. We prioritize Liam's well-being and the Foundation's work. We acknowledge that this is complicated and might not work." She took both his hands in hers. "But we also acknowledge that what we have is real and worth exploring. That courage isn't just about facing physical danger. It's also about being vulnerable with another person." Ethan looked down at their joined hands, his still rough and calloused from years of manual labor, hers soft but strong, both of them marked by the lives they'd lived. "I've been alone for a long time, since Sarah left. I didn't think I'd ever want to let someone in again. And then you came into my life in the most dramatic way possible and turned everything upside down. I've been lonely in a crowded room for years," Isabella admitted, "surrounded by people but truly known by no one. And then you appeared, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, I felt seen, understood, valued for who I am rather than what I can provide." "This is crazy," Ethan said, but he was smiling. "We barely know each other. It's only been 3 months." We've been through more in 3 months than most people experience in years. Trauma and danger and building something meaningful together. That creates bonds, Ethan. Deep ones. He stepped closer until they were barely a breath apart. If we do this, if we try, I need you to promise something. Anything. Promise that Liam comes first, that if this gets complicated or messy or threatens his stability, we put the brakes on. He's already been through so much with his mother leaving. I won't let him get attached to someone else who might disappear. Isabella's eyes softened with understanding. I promise. Liam's well-being is paramount. We'll take this slowly, carefully, always prioritizing what's best for him. And Ethan, I'm not Sarah. I don't run when things get hard. I stay and fight for what matters. She matters, Ethan said simply. You matter. Isabella's breath caught, and then she was reaching up, her hand cupping his cheek. May I kiss you? I've been wanting to for weeks, and I think if I don't do it now, I might lose my nerve. In answer, Ethan closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was gentle and searching and full of promise. She tasted like champagne and hope, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Well, Isabella said, slightly breathless, that was worth the wait. Definitely worth it, Ethan agreed. Then reality intruded. Though we should probably figure out how this works. The professional boundaries, the public perception, all of it. Tomorrow, Isabella said firmly. Tonight, we just acknowledge what this is and enjoy it. Tomorrow, we can be practical. They stood together by the window, looking out at the city that had brought them together. The streets where Ethan had struggled and survived. The towers where Isabella had built her empire. All of it visible from this height. Two people from different worlds who'd found common ground in courage and kindness, and the belief that goodness still mattered. When they finally returned to the lobby, Mrs. Chen took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly. Liam had fallen asleep in the chair, his little bow tie askew, exhausted from the excitement of the evening. Ethan scooped him up carefully, and Isabella walked them out to the waiting car. Thank you for tonight, Ethan said. For everything, the gala, the speech, the conversation in the library, all of it. Thank you for being brave enough to run toward danger 3 months ago, for changing my life and showing me what truly matters. She leaned in and kissed his cheek. I'll see you Monday morning. Coffee at 8? I wouldn't miss it. The drive home took them through quiet streets, Liam asleep against Ethan's shoulder, the city peaceful in the late hour. When they pulled up to their building, their regular, ordinary apartment building in a neighborhood that wasn't fancy or exclusive but was home, Ethan felt a surge of contentment. He'd traveled far from where he'd started, from struggling single father to foundation director, from invisible to celebrated, from alone to connected. But the core of who he was hadn't changed. He was still the man who'd run toward danger because someone needed help. Still the father who'd do anything for his son. Still the person who believed that doing right mattered more than doing well. Mrs. Chen helped him get Liam upstairs and into bed, then patted Ethan's cheek with her weathered hand. That Ms. Ford is a good woman. I see how she looks at you, how you look at her. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who's paying attention, and who's been alive long enough to recognize real connection when she sees it, she smiled. Your father would be proud of you, Ethan. Not just for the job or the fancy parties, for staying true to who you are even when everything changed, for protecting that boy, for having the courage to open your heart again. After she left, Ethan stood in Liam's doorway one more time, watching his son sleep. The apartment was quiet except for the familiar sounds of the building settling, their neighbors living their lives above and below and beside them. This was real. This mattered. His phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. Made it home safely. Thank you for taking a chance on us. Sweet dreams, Ethan. He smiled as he typed his response. Thank you for seeing something in me worth taking a chance on. Sleep well, Isabella. 6 months later, spring had transformed the city into something green and alive. The foundation had expanded its programs to all 5 boroughs, hired 20 new staff members, and partnered with dozens of community organizations. Crime was down across the board in areas where they'd implemented initiatives. More importantly, people felt safer, more connected, more empowered to look out for each other. Ethan stood in the community center in the South Side, one of the first programs they'd funded, watching Neighborhood Watch volunteers graduate from their training program. Diane Tucker, who ran the center, stood beside him with tears of pride in her eyes. "You did this," she said. "You made this possible." "We all did it together," Ethan corrected. "I just helped provide the resources." Liam sat in the front row with Mrs. Chen, both of them clapping enthusiastically as certificates were handed out. His son had grown comfortable in this world, splitting time between their regular apartment and occasional weekends at Isabella's estate, making friends with the staff at Ford Global Holdings, accompanying Ethan to community events. He was thriving, secure in the knowledge that his father loved him and that their life, while unconventional, was stable and good. After the ceremony, as people mingled and celebrated, Isabella arrived. She'd come straight from a board meeting, still in business attire, but her face lit up when she saw them. Over the past months, they'd navigated their relationship with care, keeping it private at first, then slowly letting people know, always prioritizing professionalism at work and Liam's comfort in their personal lives. It hadn't been without challenges. There were people who gossiped about the CEO dating her employee, others who questioned whether Ethan had earned his position or just charmed his way into it. But the foundation's results spoke for themselves, and gradually even the skeptics had been won over by the genuine good being accomplished. "How was the training graduation?" Isabella asked, slipping her hand into Ethan's. "Perfect. 20 new volunteers ready to make their neighborhood safer. Diane's over the moon." "As she should be. This is exactly what we envisioned." Isabella looked around the community center, at the people talking and laughing, at the posters showing safety tips and neighborhood resources, at the visible evidence of community members taking ownership of their own security. "Your father would be proud, of everything you've built." It was something she said occasionally, having learned through their many long conversations about the man who'd shaped Ethan's values and died too young. Each time, it hit him right in the chest. "I hope so," Ethan said quietly. "I think about him a lot, about what he taught me, how he'd react to all this. He'd see what I see. A man who stayed true to his principles even when the world changed around him, who used his success to help others instead of just enriching himself, who raised an incredible son while building something meaningful." She squeezed his hand. "That's a legacy anyone would be proud of." That evening, after Liam was asleep and Mrs. Chen had gone home, Ethan and Isabella sat on his apartment balcony, a tiny space barely big enough for 2 chairs, overlooking an alley and the backs of other buildings. It wasn't fancy or prestigious, but it was real. It was home. "I've been thinking about something," Isabella said, her hand in his. "The foundation is stable now, funded for years, making real impact. You've proven yourself 100 times over." "Why does this sound like a but is coming?" She laughed. "No but. Just an observation that you could go anywhere now, do anything. Your resume is incredible. Your reputation is solid. You're not tied to Ford Global Holdings or to me professionally anymore." Ethan turned to look at her, seeing the vulnerability beneath the casual words. "Are you trying to tell me something?" "I'm trying to say that you're free, to make whatever choices you want. If you want to start your own organization, or take a position elsewhere, or do something completely different, I won't hold you back. Professionally or personally, you've given me so much, Ethan. I don't want to be the thing that limits you." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city lights. "Do you remember what you asked me that night at the gala? Whether I was brave enough for us?" "I remember. I've been thinking about that, about courage and what it means. I used to think it was just about running toward danger, about physical bravery, but I've learned it's more than that." He turned to face her fully. "It's about being vulnerable, about building something meaningful even when it's scary, about opening your heart when you've been hurt before, about choosing love and connection over safety and isolation." "Ethan." "I'm not going anywhere, Isabella, not professionally, not personally, because what we've built, both the foundation and us, is exactly where I want to be. You didn't limit me. You set me free. Free to become the person I was meant to be, to do work that matters, to love someone who sees me for exactly who I am." Isabella's eyes were bright with tears. "You're sure? Even with all the complications and the gossip and the way people will always see us through the lens of how we met? I've never been more sure of anything. Well, except maybe the decision to run toward danger that rainy night. He smiled. Best decision I ever made, by the way. Even with everything it cost, everything it changed, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So would I, Isabella said. All of it. The fear, the danger, the complicated aftermath. Because it brought you into my life. It gave me purpose again. It reminded me what really matters. They sat together in the small balcony, two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way, watching the city breathe and move and live. The same city where Ethan had once struggled to survive, where Isabella had built her empire, where both of them had been lost in their own ways until one moment of courage had changed everything. Ms. Ford, Liam's sleepy voice came from the doorway. I had a bad dream. Isabella immediately stood, holding out her hand. Come here, sweetheart. Let's get you back to bed. Ethan watched as she led his son back inside, murmuring comforting words, her expensive clothes and CEO status forgotten in the simple act of caring for a scared child. This was who she really was beneath the polish and power, someone with a huge heart who'd been waiting for people she could love without calculation or agenda. Later, after Liam had been settled and was breathing deeply in sleep once more, Isabella returned to the balcony. He asked if I was going to leave like his mom did. Ethan's chest tightened. What did you tell him? I told him I love him, and I love you, and I'm not going anywhere unless you both want me to. That when I commit to people, I stay. That he's stuck with me if he'll have me. And what did he say? Isabella smiled, and it was radiant with joy and love. He said, good, because you make my dad happy, and you're nice, and you let me feed the ducks. So apparently I've been accepted into the family on the strength of duck-feeding privileges. Ethan laughed, pulling her into his arms. That sounds about right. Liam has his priorities. They stood together, holding each other, and Ethan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, complete peace. Not the absence of problems or challenges, but the deep security of knowing that whatever came, they'd face it together. That he wasn't alone anymore. That he'd built something real and lasting from one moment of courage. I love you, he said, the words coming easily now, though they'd been terrifying the first time he'd said them. You and this crazy life we're building, all of it. I love you too, Isabella replied. My hero, my partner, my home. The city stretched out before them, millions of lives and stories and moments of courage happening every day. Somewhere out there, someone was making a choice to help or to hurt, to step up or to look away, to be brave or to be safe. And maybe, just maybe, some of those people would choose courage because they'd heard about a security guard who'd run toward danger and changed his life. That was the real legacy, Ethan thought, not the foundation or the money or the recognition, but the ripple effects of one good choice, spreading out in ways he'd never fully understand, inspiring others to be brave, to help, to believe that one person could make a difference. 2 years after that rainy night, Ethan Cole stood at the altar in a small chapel, watching Isabella walk toward him in a simple white dress. Liam stood beside him as best man, holding the rings with solemn pride. Mrs. Chen sat in the front row, crying happy tears. Marcus and Patricia were there, along with community leaders and foundation staff and neighbors from the old building who'd become family. It was a small wedding, intimate and genuine, focused on the people who truly mattered rather than on spectacle or status. Isabella had insisted, after years of living in the public eye, of every moment being calculated and strategic, she wanted this to be real. Just them, their people, and the commitment they were making to build a life together. As Isabella reached the altar and took his hands, Ethan felt the full weight of how far they'd both come. From that terrifying moment in the rain to this moment of joy and promise. From strangers to partners to love. From two people lost in their own ways to a family choosing each other every single day. Dearly beloved, the officiant began, but Ethan barely heard the traditional words. He was too focused on Isabella's face, on the love and trust and hope he saw there, on the knowledge that he'd been brave enough to run toward danger, and in doing so had run straight toward the best thing that ever happened to him. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke from his heart. 3 years ago, I made a choice in 3 seconds that changed my life. But the better choice, the one that took real courage, was saying yes when you offered me a chance at something more. Was opening my heart when I'd convinced myself it was safer to stay closed. Was believing that I deserved this happiness, this love, this life. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Isabella. You gave me purpose and partnership and a love I never thought I'd find, and I promised to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that gift, to protect you, to support you, to love you and Liam and whatever family we build together, to run toward you, always, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. Isabella's vows were equally heartfelt. Ethan, you taught me what true courage looks like. Not the calculated risks I take in business, but the genuine bravery of being vulnerable, of helping without expectation of reward, of loving with your whole heart. You saw me, not my money or my status or what I could do for you, but me. And you chose to protect that person even when it cost you everything. I promise to honor that gift, to see you, always, to choose you, every day, to be the partner you deserve and the mother figure Liam needs, to build a life where love and courage and goodness are the foundation of everything we do. When they kissed, Liam cheered loudly, making everyone laugh, and when they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Ethan caught Mrs. Chen's eye and saw approval and joy there, the blessing of the woman who'd been his lifeline through the hardest years. The reception was held in the community center where Ethan had first seen the fruits of their foundation's work. It felt appropriate, celebrating their marriage in a place that represented everything they'd built together, surrounded by people whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of one act of courage. As they danced their first dance, Isabella whispered, "Happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," Ethan replied honestly. "You?" "So happy I can barely believe it's real. That you're real, that this beautiful life is ours." Liam cut in halfway through the dance, insisting on dancing with both of them, and they ended up swaying together as a family unit while guests looked on with warm smiles. This was their life now, imperfect and blended and full of love. A single father and a CEO and a little boy who'd brought them together in ways neither adult fully understood, but both deeply appreciated. Later, as the reception wound down and guests began to leave, Ethan stood with Isabella and Liam looking out at the community they'd helped transform. The neighborhood was safer now, more connected, full of people who'd learned to protect each other. It was tangible proof that courage mattered, that one person could spark change, that goodness could spread. "Dad?" Liam tugged on his sleeve. "When I grow up, I want to be like you." Ethan crouched down to his son's level, his heart full to bursting. "What do you mean, buddy?" "I want to help people, to be brave, to make things better." Liam's face was serious, earnest in that way only children could be. "You're a real hero, Dad. Not like in movies, but better. Because you're real." Ethan pulled his son into a tight hug, feeling Isabella's hand on his shoulder. "You know what makes someone a hero, Liam? Not being the strongest or the fastest or the bravest. It's choosing to help even when it's hard. It's caring about people even when it costs you something. It's showing up every single day and trying to make the world a little bit better. You can do that. Anyone can. That's the secret. We're all capable of being heroes if we just choose to try." "I'm going to try," Liam promised. "Every day." "Then you're already a hero, buddy. You already are." As they drove home that night, to the house they'd bought together in a good neighborhood with good schools, a far cry from the tiny apartment where they'd started, Ethan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From struggling single father to foundation director to husband and partner in a life full of purpose and love. From invisible to celebrated to something better, valued for who he was rather than what he'd done. The knife scar on his arm had faded but remained visible, a permanent reminder of the cost of courage. Sometimes Ethan traced it absently, remembering that rainy night, the fear and adrenaline and the choice that had changed everything. He'd run toward danger, not knowing what it would cost or what it would bring, and somehow, miraculously, it had brought him everything. Years passed, and the foundation grew. They expanded to other cities, trained thousands of volunteers, helped countless communities become safer and more connected. Liam grew up confident and kind, shaped by parents who showed him that doing good mattered more than doing well. He volunteered at community centers, stood up for classmates who were bullied, eventually went into social work himself, carrying forward the legacy of courage that had defined his childhood. Ethan and Isabella built a life of meaning and purpose, never forgetting where they'd started or how they'd found each other. They remained grounded in their values, even as their influence grew, always prioritizing people over profit, compassion over calculation. On the 10th anniversary of that rainy night, they returned to the Grand Meridian Hotel for a foundation gala. Ethan stood on the exact spot where he'd tackled the kidnapper, where Isabella had collapsed in his arms, where everything had changed. "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella asked, standing beside him in the spot where they'd met. "All the complications it brought? The threats? The danger? The way it turned your life upside down?" Ethan looked at her, his wife, his partner, his best friend, and felt certainty settle in his chest. "Not for a second. That was the moment my real life began. Everything before was just existing, surviving. But from that moment on, I've been truly alive." "Me too," she said softly. "You gave me my life back, Ethan, in every way that matters." They stood together, watching guests arrive for the gala, watching the foundation staff coordinate logistics, watching the tangible proof of what one moment of courage had created. Thousands of lives touched, communities transformed, a legacy of goodness spreading in ways they'd never fully comprehend. Inside the ballroom, a new generation of community leaders would be celebrated tonight. People who'd been inspired by Ethan's story, who'd chosen courage over comfort, who were building on the foundation they'd established. The work would continue long after they were gone, rippling out in infinite directions. That was the real power of courage, Ethan had learned. Not the single act, but the example it set. Not the immediate impact, but the long-term transformation. Not just saving one life, but inspiring countless others to be the kind of people who stepped up when someone needed help. He'd been a single dad who stopped a kidnapping outside a luxury hotel, never knowing she was a CEO. But the truth was so much bigger than that simple story. He'd been a man who chose courage over comfort, who built a life of meaning from one split-second decision, who proved that ordinary people could create extraordinary change. And in doing so, he'd saved more than just Isabella's life that rainy night. He'd saved his own. As they walked into the gala together, hand in hand, Ethan looked back one more time at the spot where it had all begun. The rain was long gone, but the memory remained, vivid and precious and transformative. He'd run toward danger in a moment of pure instinct and found his way home.